have the clerk call roll, please?
Yes, Governor Susana Martinez, Lieutenant Governor John Sanchez,
I'm here.
State Treasurer Stu Meichenberg,
I'm following you.
Member Michael Brasher,
Here.
Member Robert Aragon,
Present.
Member Delmo Archuleta,
Here.
Member John Corman.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Let's go to item number 2, which is the approval of the agenda. Make an announcement that the next regular meeting will be held Tuesday, October 16th, here in the Capitol. Is there any discussion concerning the agenda? Approval of the agenda?
Move approval.
Very well. I have a motion. Do I have a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. All right. Very well. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. Items number 3 through 10. Let's go to Donna Maestas. Donna?
Lieutenant Governor, members of the board, the following items are on the consent agenda. Action item number 3, approval of the minutes for the July 17th, 2018 regular meetings. Action item number 4, Alamogordo Public Schools requests approval of the trade of real property known as Lot 162, Mission Hills, Unit 2 in Alamogordo, in exchange for property designated as a portion of 13th Street between North Florida Avenue and Alaska Avenue in Alamogordo with the city of Alamogordo. There's no consideration. Approval is contingent upon director's receipt and council review of 1, the revised quitclaim deed, and 2, the land trade agreement with a revised legal description. Action item number 5, Bernalillo County requests approval of the donation of real property located at 1009 and 1015 Isleta Southeast in Albuquerque to Albuquerque Public Schools. There's no consideration. Approval is contingent upon director's receipt and council review of the fully executed revised donation agreement. Action item number 6, Eddy County requests approval of the sale of real property consisting of approximately 20.99 acres of land on the northeast side of Thomas Drive in Carlsbad to Occidental Petroleum Inc. for $1,520,715. Approval is contingent upon director's receipt and council review of 1, the fully executed revised purchase agreement, making amendments subject to board of finance approval, removing warranties and covenants, and remove indemnification language. Number 2, letter from the appraiser confirming the property description, and number 3 is favorable TRD review of the appraisal report. Action item number 7, General Services Department, Facilities Management Division, requests approval of the acquisition of real property totaling 2.18 acres in Artesia for the Energy, Mineral, and Natural Resources Department from Stonegate Trust LLC for $285,000 plus closing costs. Contingent upon director's receipt and a favorable TRD review of the appraisal report. Action item number 8, Loving Municipal School District number 10 requests approval of the lease of gas, oil, and mineral rights in the village of Loving to BC Operating Inc. and acceptance of alternative evidence of fair market value for $10,100 per net mineral acre and 25% of royalty for oil sales, other liquid hydrocarbons, and gas. Action item number 9, New Mexico Junior College requests approval of the sale of real property known as the Del Norte Center, located at 1503 West Pines 3rd in Helms to Jalyu for $255,000. It's contingent upon director's receipt and council review of the fully executed revised purchase agreement, making amendments subject to board of finance approval, removing warranties and covenants, and number 2, the quitclaim deed. We did receive these documents this morning, but staff still needs to review. Action item number 10, New Mexico Junior College requests approval of the donation of real property located at 1710 Avenue J in Eunice Public Schools. There is no consideration. Approval is contingent upon director's receipt and council review of the fully executed donation agreement and the quitclaim deed.
Thank you, Donna. Do we have any discussion on the consent agenda?
Move approval, Mr. Chairman. Second.
Very well. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. To those folks who are here for those action items, they have passed. You're welcome to stay, but you're more than welcome to leave if you'd like. We're going to move on. All right. Very well. Thank you. We're going on to item number 11, which is information, which is the emergency fund balances. Donna, would you present this?
Lieutenant Governor, members of the board, as of today, the operating reserve fund has a balance of $1,941,495. And the emergency water fund has a balance of $104,800.
Your discussion on the emergency fund balances. But, I'd like to make a comment. We were asked several meetings ago for some emergency funding to the Secretary of State for the litigation. And I know that was a tough decision at the time. We all voiced concerns about what this emergency fund balance was for. Donna, could you tell us, did they, the Secretary of State, did they find that money? Did anybody have information on that? Staff, did anybody want to comment? It's my understanding, they did. Yeah, it's my understanding that they actually found the money within their budget. They settled the lawsuit and they paid their legal fees, I believe. And I think that was a testament to very disciplined action by this board that really had our priorities are this emergency fund balance should be used for those particular funds and those emergencies that come up. So I just thought I would bring the board up to speed and others short of the room that they fulfilled their obligation and we were able to move on without touching this fund balance. So. All right, very well. Let's go on to property dispositions and acquisitions. Action item number 12, Department of Cultural Affairs, the National Hispanic Cultural Center requests approval of the lease of real property located at 1701 4th Street in Albuquerque to the National Hispanic Cultural Center Foundation in the amount of $2,286 per month to include services in lieu of cash. Do we have folks here? Yes.
Yes.
All right. Would you take a seat and introduce yourself for the record and then proceed with your presentation?
Good morning, Mr. Lieutenant Governor and distinguished board members. My name is Jennifer Salazar. I'm General Counsel for the New Mexico Department of Cultural Affairs. The director of the National Hispanic Cultural Center is on her way, but she had some car difficulties this morning, so she may walk in a few minutes late. But we are here today the Department of Cultural Affairs and the National Hispanic Cultural Center are here today to seek the board's approval to lease approximately 1,600 square feet of office and storage space to the National Hispanic Cultural Center Foundation for their operation of its business. The reasons for leasing to the NHCC Foundation are as follows. There's a critical collaboration between the Hispanic Cultural Center and the foundation staff, and having the staff in close proximity maximizes staff time. In addition, it increases the delivery of programming and fundraising efforts, and it also increases the visitor experience to have both the foundation and the NHCC together in one location. The key terms of the lease are as follows. It's a 5-year lease term with 17 square feet as follows. 1,283 square feet of office space located in the Pete Domenici Center, and that was appraised at $18 per square foot for the first year. And 334 square feet of storage space in the Disney Performing Arts Center, and that was appraised at $13 per square foot for the first year. Let's see. The annual rate is about $27,436 with a per month rent of $2,246. There's a 2.5% annual escalation over the term of the lease. And at this point, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, I'm going to stand for questions.
Yeah, very well. Do we have others here? Just coming? No? Thank you. Let's go ahead and go to the board. Do we have any questions on this particular request? Yes, Senator McCormick.
Could you go through a little bit how basically the in-kind compensation was accounted for and how you will basically provide the documentation that indeed the in-kind matches the provisions that under the agreement?
Well, could I add to that question if I could? Because I'm wondering the same thing, and my recollection, Member Formanek, is that the last time you all came before us, that was the issue, is how will you determine market price on some of the hotel rooms and airline tickets and et cetera. And I believe our staff suggested an outline for keeping very good records of all of that. So I just like to add, have those records been maintained?
Yes, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, Member Clematic, Member Archuleta, and board members, yes, we have. You'll see Exhibit D and E to the lease agreement. These are the same attachments that were attached to the lease that you approved in 2015. And it identifies the value of the hotel rooms, the airline tickets, and Exhibit E is a sample of the reporting that we're gonna use. And this is our director, Rebecca Vitia, and she can talk a little bit more about the reporting that she has been doing and how she plans to continue reporting. Thank you.
And if I might,
Yes.
where I'm going with that is if you were subject to an audit, that's the concern, being on a board like this. If you were subject to an audit, would an auditor find, A, that you have that entire audit trail, number one, and number two, that there would be a very defendable market value that has been, determined by somebody maybe independently or whatever. That's what I'd like to hear, just to make sure that the records are very clean.
Lieutenant Governor and board members, I apologize for being late. Our state vehicle was not turning on this morning, so, but we got here. So, absolutely, the NHCC Foundation is subject to an annual audit every year. And all of the in-kind that we receive is a part of that audit. So it is indeed being reviewed every year as a part of their process, and that is required under the operating agreement, separate agreement, but that does exist between the center and the foundation. In terms of our own documentation, we do use the Exhibit E. We receive, as has been discussed when you've seen this lease in the past, we receive a substantial amount of additional support from the foundation, far beyond what is documented here. However, we do ensure that we are meeting the minimum requirements as well as limiting that carryover balance as has been required in the past. We plan to continue to do so, so we do receive confirmation on the airline vouchers, the hotel room nights that are used, and for the marketing, we do request to actually have a copy of the invoice. So we have all of that documentation. In terms of the valuation of the hotel nights and the airline vouchers, those are a little bit interesting because what they do is they value it over a period of time. So Southwest Airlines and Heritage Hotels in this case, they look at the value of all of the hotel nights that are being used over the year and give us that average. Frequently, we are having to make arrangements at the last minute, which is all of us who book travel know will make your costs sort of skyrocket and turn a not that expensive airline ticket into be very expensive. So that happens with us frequently due to the nature of the people whose travel we're booking, which is artists.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I'm sure it did. All the time, I guess we have to be diligent when you're talking in kind here. We see them, those kind of proposals periodically. And so I appreciate the fact that it is audited by your external auditor, and thank you.
Very good. All right, do we have other questions from board members? Staff want to add anything before we go to vote?
Sure, so the past exhibits that the board required the last time this lease came to the board in 2016 are on page 806 of the electronic agenda, and the supporting invoices for those exhibits are on page 835.
So, okay, very well. Any other comments, questions? If not, I will entertain a motion, please.
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those disapproved. Motion passes. Congratulations. Good job. I hope you have better luck with your. All right,
Thank you all
you.
so much.
All right, we're moving on. We're going to item number 13 on today's calendar. We have the Department of Health. Request approval of the purchase of real property known as the Fort Bayard Medical Center in Fort Bayard, New Mexico, from Grant County, in the amount of $63,242,238. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please take a seat, get comfortable, and when you're all ready to go, the secretary, introduce yourself along with the rest of the presenters for the record, and then go ahead and proceed with the presentation.
Honorable Lieutenant Governor and esteemed members of the board, my name is Lynn Gallagher. I am the Secretary for the New Mexico Department of Health, and we are here to discuss to you our refinancing of the Fort Beard Medical Center and the land grant in Silver City. With me, I have a number of different experts, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves, starting with Roy.
Good morning, my name is Roy McDonald. I'm the ASD Director for the Department of Health.
Morning, I'm Peter Franklin. I'm with Michael Sperling. We're serving as bond counsel on this transaction with the department.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lieutenant Governor and members of the board. My name is George Morgan. I'm with the Department of Health, Deputy ASD Director.
Good morning, Anna Sbof, acting division director, facilities management.
Very well, thank you. Go ahead, proceed, please.
Great. Committee members, I believe that our presentation begins on page 891 in your packet. And just by way of context, I wanted to give you a little overview of the Department of Health. We are the largest state agency, and we operate, in addition to the 5 24/7 facilities, we also administer the centralized public health system in the state, but we are particularly talking today about one of our 5 facilities, Fort Beard Medical Center in Silver City. On the third slide, you'll see that Fort Beard Medical Center is a 24/7 long-term care facility with 200 duly certified beds, meaning we accept Medicare and Medicaid. Fort Beard provides nursing and medical care, social services, recreational, physical, and occupational speech therapy. And the primary services are skilled rehabilitation and extended care, which are 70 beds, and then dementia care, and then the veterans unit. Next slide. A little bit of history. So in July 1966, the state took ownership of the old VA hospital in Silver City. And then in 2007, we entered into what is now the lease purchase agreement with the Grant County members to build a new long-term care facility. And then in 2010, construction was completed for that new facility. And the old facility was permanently closed, but remains on site. And then in 2017, we had a chemical dependency unit that we successfully relocated to Roswell. In the next slide. So what we're talking about today is the current lease purchase agreement, which gives us the authority to defease the bonds. And that lease purchase agreement requires us, as the lessee DOH, to perform all the maintenance, repairs, and modifications to the facility. It also allows the state the option to purchase the project from Grant County, which is one of the things that we will do in this transaction. And the purchase price of the project is based on the value of the land without improvements and any amount necessary to defease those bonds. Also, under the lease purchase agreement, an appraisal was required, which we have done, and it is included in your packet. Next slide. Under the lease purchase agreement, the option to purchase the project was considered. We began talking about this a long time ago, but we knew that the bonds were going to be callable in July of 2018, and so at that point, we then engaged with General Services and DFA and many other members to discuss the fundamentals behind how we would do this in a more successful manner for the state as a whole. And the decision then was made to be able to defease the bonds, which will give us an opportunity to have a lower interest rate. We will be purchasing, obviously, money at a lower rate than when we originally entered into the lease, and then it will afford us an opportunity to make needed repairs, not only to the infrastructure, but to some of the building and some of the equipment inside for better patient care. The next slide, I won't go into these in detail. I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions, but on slide 7, these are a number of the issues that we need to repair. One of the fundamental is the water issue. We are currently leasing water right now from the village of Santa Clara, which is hard water, and it is causing us additional maintenance costs and repairs to a lot of the equipment, washers, and outsourcing things that we wouldn't need to if we could repair the water infrastructure and have access to the nice, clean spring water. Slide 8 will show you a little bit about the cost of some of these repairs. Again, I will allow you to go through that on your own, but I would highlight, about 8 million will go into, no more than 8.5 million will go into repairing that water infrastructure, which again becomes a key cost savings for the state if we can roll it into this refinancing opportunity.
Yeah, we're gonna ask questions.
Yes, Member Archuleta.
Just on that spring water, we're talking about $9 million or so. And I assume that you're talking about an artesian spring of some kind that is groundwater that's under pressure and coming out. Is that right? Okay. So has somebody done a study to determine not only the quality of that water, but the quantity of that water? I mean, put it under some kind of a test to make sure that if you invest that kind of money, that what a sustainable flow rate is going to be for the next 20 years. Has anybody done that? Test you'd have to pump it and then you'd have to see how the groundwater recovers and make sure that you're not mining the water where the water level goes down and then pretty soon you don't have an artesian situation and so on and so forth. Has somebody done geohydraulic studies?
Committee members, I'll have George Morgan answer that specifically, but we have been working with the state engineer and others to make sure that the artesian spring remains high, but
Yeah,
we
but
have
I
been
mean,
testing.
and with all due respect to the state engineer, that's all good and fine, but until you go out there and actually do an in situ test to make sure that test pump it, you may or may not know. That's why I'm asking.
So, Lieutenant Governor, members of the board, there was an engineering study done back, I think it's 2007, 2008 timeframe. We're actually utilizing that engineering study to develop our estimates and the quality of water, if you will, to tie that in. There are 19 spring boxes. They've been existing since, back in the early 1900s, and have been utilized. Right now, there's about 16 of those spring boxes that are active. The flow rates are down on the spring boxes due to root infiltration into the spring boxes. There is a tower tank and there is a ground tank, both of which are operable, and we receive water today. We are supplying 40 acre-feet of water to the Federal Veterans Cemetery there today, and the flow rate continues. The engineering study does identify, I can't be specific as to the amount of water that flows from those springs. I don't know that for many years the flow rates have been down because the maintenance to the spring boxes have been kept to a minimum just because the water has not been utilized. Okay, we feel very confident in the engineering study, and part of these dollars is to update that engineering study so that we can verify the amount of water that is necessary. And back to the state engineer, the state engineer has allowed X amount of acre feet per organization, per entity to utilize through those springs. So we want to make sure that we can not only fulfill our needs, but all the needs that the state requires for those spring boxes.
Yeah,
And that is part of it.
not to get into detail at this point, but I'm just suggesting to you that having the appropriation of water, having the average amount of water that you're gonna need is one thing. But when you build a facility like you're talking about that people are gonna depend on from a healthcare standpoint, et cetera, you have to look at, and I'm sure you know this and an engineer will help you, you have to look at high demand minutes. What is the highest peak flow that we need in that day or that hour or whatever it might be? And that's really what I'm asking. And so you can make some of that up with storage tanks and all that kind of stuff, but typically springs it's good to know that you have a cluster of them and you're gonna probably work them together and all that. But make sure that you do test pumping and that you're able to determine not only the total quantity, but instantaneous demand that you'll need in a peak day at the facility. See what I mean? And you can water the cemetery whenever you want to. I mean, that's not a peak event. You can do that at midnight if you want to. A peak event is we have everything full, we have to have this demand for water, so on and so forth, and is it gonna be reliable? So you don't spend $9 million on something and then find out, well, we still have to get Santa Clara water, because that would involve, some kind of treatment, which you could do. I don't know which one's the best investment, but an engineering study, I'm sure we're going to do that.
So Lieutenant Governor, Member Archuleta, just from a due diligence standpoint, the Fort Berry Medical Center is an accredited accredited hospital. So looking at, and I appreciate those comments and those concerns with the water and the quality, we need to make sure to accredit that hospital and to license that hospital, we have certain requirements, storage requirements, flow requirements, and also to look at backup resources. We know that we do not receive waters from the local county, from the local Silver City. We do rely on Santa Clara today. So we want to make sure that this water infrastructure is our primary source, that it's engineered appropriately, that we maintain that, but also we want to make sure we have a backup source of water, which we want to continue to work with Santa Clara.
And you might need to use a combination of those two, where a water with high TDS, like you were talking about, with high calcium, magnesium, et cetera, doesn't matter out when you're watering the cemetery or whatever it might be, but use the acid water, right, in those places where you don't get calcification and so on and so forth that you're talking about. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, and I would just like to add to that, because I think this board has seen over the last almost 8 years, really well-intended projects where they've come back and they've said, well, we overlooked that, or we assumed that was going to be the case, or they were relying on past or previous reports. And I would agree with Member Archuleta that we ought to, in the long-term best interest of the taxpayer, and providing the services to the people who need it the most, that especially this, again, $8.5 million, I'd like to see some updated, newer type of studies done so they can make sure that, the different changes. So whether you believe in climate change or you don't, but especially in Southwest New Mexico, it's very iffy right now. And so the springs that were one day reliable aren't as reliable. Look at Albuquerque. We pumped the aquifer for all those years, and living in the North Valley, we saw our roads start to just concave. They had to stop what they were doing because we all assumed, based on old studies, that the aquifer was just, you'd never, depleted. And we saw that it was dropping rapidly. So they made changes to, thank God they did, it's replenishing. But again, would encourage, and I don't know if we want to maybe talk about something, we'll go to vote on this thing about getting some newer updated information, but all right.
And if I may, Lieutenant Governor and members of the board, I would say that doing it in a refinance like this gives us, as the agency, with GSD, the opportunity to do it in a staged approach where we have built in that those new assessments, and then we can stagger step to see what is the best effect through the cost savings, rather than one-time monies that go away and then we've lost that opportunity and then we have to come back to the board to make a different decision.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This project is still a great project for the reason that you're doing it, et cetera. I'm just advising a lot of caution. You don't take it for granted that, et cetera, that without those very detailed questions and certification, you're going to really help guide them. So.
Thank you.
And then with that, I'll just go to the last slide, which is really talking about, we receive an annual appropriation for this debt service that, the goal is that we utilize that money for some of those cost savings and those stepped approach infrastructure needs. And with that, I'll send for further questions. But we are anticipating more than $1 million savings over the course of the year.
Thank you, Secretary. So let's go to the board. Questions? Yes, Member.
I just need to understand the process a little better. So currently, the property is owned by Grant County,
Lieutenant Governor, yes, sir.
who have basically issued bonds in 2007 or so. Go ahead. Franklin.
Member Cormack, 2008.
2008, okay. So they're callable now. Now, over this period of time, the health department has had a lease purchase agreement with Grant County.
That is correct.
Okay, and you have basically met that lease purchase agreement through appropriations by the legislature and presumably some federal funds.
That is correct.
Now you're gonna basically defease the outstanding bonds, issue a new set of bonds that will, and use those proceeds to purchase the building as well as the property.
Well, we have to purchase the property from Grant County.
Okay.
we purchased the property from Grant County, the building and the ordinances on it are not part of that purchase price under the lease.
Okay, but that purchase is being provided by the issuance of the new bonds.
That is correct.
And so there will not really be, what I'm understanding is that with the refinancing of the new bonds, that you're gonna save, did I hear $1 million
$1 million in 20 years, yes.
over 20 years? Okay. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to understand.
And our interest rate is gonna reduce, and then we're going to have a lower debt service payment, which will allow us the flexibility to then be able to enhance the infrastructure.
Well,
And then-
have you incorporated these savings into your 2020 budget request?
The budget request has been submitted exactly like this, taking into consideration, and we've met with LFC, taking into consideration this opportunity.
Thank you.
Don?
Lieutenant Governor, members of the board, we have someone from NMFA here, Zach Dillenbeck, he's the Chief Lending Officer for Public Lending, so he might be able to speak a little bit more about the bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. NMFA did review and approve this transaction unanimously in order to do the refunding and essentially fill the savings created by the refunding bonds with new money to address the capital needs. From NMFA standpoint, we are in the position where our board will consider a bond offering back in October, sale in early November so that it can close by the end of November, November 28th for the sale. So from our standpoint, the refunding piece of this is incredibly attractive. The pricing in 2008 creates for a structure there that the tremendous savings is gained, and given the dollar amount need for capital improvements, from our standpoint, it really makes sense. It seems to be a win-win to not only create savings and kind of fill the savings with new money to quickly complete improvements.
Who issued the original bonds? Grant County? Okay, thank you.
I don't. Because that DOA transpired. So this really is, as Zach said, a win-win situation to kind of get out from under that agreement with Grant County and provide the facility with a little bit more cash to do some work.
And Lieutenant Governor, members of the committee, it also gives us an opportunity to sort of write it. So the way it was done with Grant County, and Grant County also issued in their county commission meeting a unanimous resolution to support this as well. But it gives the authority and ownership to general services where it rightly should be for a state-owned property.
That was gonna be my questions. Do we have support from the county? And understand. Want to make sure as well. Any other further questions, comments? Staff? No, I'll entertain a motion. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Yes, yes.
Sorry, there is one contingency.
Is that taking Duffy's name off the original?
Contingent of no reference to NMFA loan funds.
Very well. With that, yes. All right, well, thank you, folks. It's been approved. All right, very well. Let's move on to item number 14. We have Mora County, request approval of amended lease of real property located at number 10 Courtyard Drive in Mora, to the administration office of the courts, in the amount of $10,000 per month. Should we sit over there? Good morning, folks. Go ahead and grab a seat and get comfortable, and then we'll have you introduce yourselves and start with the presentation. So go ahead and have a seat with us.
Thank you, Mr. Paula Garcia, the commission chair, is delayed coming down from Mora. We expect her to be here momentarily, so we feel that she's essential to the
If you want to,
presentation.
maybe we can pass over, come back to you. Why don't we do that? Okay, so why don't you go ahead and we're gonna move on to item number 15, and then we'll come back to you, okay?
Very much.
Very well, we're gonna move on to item number 15, which is the Rio Metro Regional Transit District. Request approval of financing for Rio Metro Regional Transit Positive Train Control Project financing in the amount of $11,700,000. Good morning, folks. If you will, please have a seat. Introduce yourselves and then proceed with the presentation.
Morning, Lieutenant Governor, board members. Thanks for having us here today. My name is Terry Noel. I'm the director of the Rio Metro Regional Transit District. And I have some folks with me that I think I'll have them introduce themselves.
Please.
Good morning, Larry Horan, I'm general counsel for Rio Metro Regional Transit.
Good morning, Mr. Governor, members of the board. I'm Laura Sanchez-Rivera. I'm with Cuddy McCarthy Law Firm. I'm bond counsel in this county.
Good morning, my name is Evan McKiss. I'm with RBC Capital Markets, municipal advisor to Rio Metro.
All right, good. Please proceed.
Lieutenant Governor and board members, our request today is we have a federal mandate upon us for the New Mexico Railroad Express to install what is called positive train control. What this is kind of an overlay system that sits over the train, makes the locomotive kind of aware of where it is on the track, aware of what speed it should be going on the track in certain locations, and also is in kind of constant communication with the wayside to look at signals. And what it does is it kind of provides a safety barrier between the human element and things going wrong, where if an engineer or a conductor driving a locomotive doesn't take appropriate action to slow the train down, this system will slow the train down. If the engineer runs a red light, this will put the train into emergency stop immediately and stop it. And then there's a couple other things, incursions into active work zones where we've got people working on the track. If a train goes past a portion of the track that's designated as a stopping point, this system will interrupt it and stop it. So federal mandate, we've worked really diligently with the federal government, with DOT, to try and get out of having to do this. We were looking at exemptions and ways that we could submit to the federal government and that would allow us to continue operating Rail Runner at the level of service that it is right now without having to install this. So our first try at that was denied by FRA. FRA came to meet with us at our facilities. Indicated to us that they thought there was a way for us to get kind of a temporary reprieve from having to do this by the end of this year, but they still wanted us to move forward and accomplish putting this in by the end of 2020. So we're working with FRA to get that temporary exclusion from having to do this by the end of this year. That would allow us an additional 2 years to install this. On top of that, we issued an RFP back in January of this year. And we've awarded that RFP. We're in contract negotiations with a vendor to install positive train control on the New Mexico Railroad Express. Their bid price for the base bid was $55 million, not including gross receipts tax. And obviously, we've been working on a financial package prior to issuing that and during the whole time that we've kind of been going forward on this. That financial package originally was set up for us to use federal funds that come in that support the Rail Runner from Federal Transit Administration in the form of 5337 funds, state of repair funds, which are eligible for this purchase. Also, gross receipts tax and the SID loan approval that's before you today really makes up our local match to leverage those federal funds. And then we've also been applying for grant money. In 2017, we were successful in receiving $3.6 million off of the FTA PTC grant. And this year we've been successful, I think actually since we submitted this to your agenda, we've been successful in receiving $29.4 million under a CRISI grant from Federal Railroad Administration. So this request for this SID loan today is basically our local match to leverage those federal funds for this project. With gross receipts tax on the project, we believe that the $58 million will be sufficient for us to move forward on the base bid. I think that there's some things in the analysis that's been done for you. Our initial ask with DOT and what we're probably going to execute in the beginning is a $10.9 million state infrastructure bank loan. The resolution that Rio Metro Regional Transit District Board of Directors passed gave some discretion to the chief executive officer to increase that amount by 10% if we needed to, and we do have some additional things that we can add to the contract that were contemplated at the time of the RFP. One of those is signaling in the downtown Albuquerque area that's currently restricted limits. That would allow us to kind of increase some speed in there. And so we're contemplating maybe the ability to be able to do that as part of this contract. And so what we've got before you is basically an ask to approve the state infrastructure bank loan and us entering into that for $11.7 million, though the initial agreement that we'll enter into with DOT will be for 10.9. And I guess with that, I'll stand with any questions, or if anybody else here has anything they'd like to add.
Okay, well, let's go to the board and then we'll go back. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I just need to divulge the relationship, I guess, for some reason. The last time I played golf with Terry, who else did we answer the relationship, including by double digits, he was sober. And I just want everybody to know that Jack Moore, the
Mr. Treasurer, if you had to recuse yourself, I don't say you are, but divulge you that on everybody who beat you in a game of golf. Never vote. Never, ever vote.
Well, with that challenge, Governor, I would be happy to host you on the golf course. Knowing that you don't play.
Even there, I'll accept that. Duly noted. Will the clerk make that part of the record? Anything else, Mr. Treasurer? Member Koenig?
No, I haven't got any questions.
Okay. Anybody else on the board?
I guess I have a question.
Yes.
Terry, you said in your presentation that you did everything you could to get out of this. Yeah, it's a safety feature. Could you tell me more about that? I mean, do you just mean that you wish you didn't have to incur the cost that you're having, the state's having to incur, or the entities having to incur in all of this? Do you have any doubts about the effectiveness of the system?
Sure, Lieutenant Governor and Board Member Archuleta. So what I'll say is, in the legislation that's drafted, there is the ability for a railroad to not have to install this under some certain conditions, and those conditions are the following: that the line is owned by a freight railroad that's not a Class 1 freight railroad, that there are less than 12 passenger trains a day that operate on the line, and that there's less than 15 million gross tons of freight that operate on the line in a given year. So we felt like we met that, with the exception, including Amtrak, we run 18 trains a day between kind of Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and 16 trains a day between Berlin and Albuquerque. So we were willing to lower the amount of trains that we ran to fit within kind of that threshold. So that's what we told FRA that we were willing to do. We submitted a request to be granted an exemption under that. And FRA came back to us and said, since the state bought the rail, we do not consider you a freight railroad that's not a Class 1 railroad. We consider you a passenger railroad. And so we're going to require that you install this. However, they were nice enough to meet with us and give us kind of another path to allow us to get an extension to 2020. As far as your second part of the question and the effectiveness of this system. So I want to be clear, I think that this is super effective. I also want to be clear that to date, in the 12 years that Rail Runner's been operating, not one of the accidents that we've had on the territory would be prevented by installing this system. So I think from our point of view, when you look at this nationwide, this is something that's a necessity. I think especially if you look at the things that Amtrak has done probably over the last 5 years with the derailment in Philadelphia, with the recent crashes on the West Coast. This is something that would have prevented those incidents from happening. The likelihood of those occurring on this line is pretty low because we don't have the volume of traffic and we don't have that going on here. I do also want to say though that it not only protects us, it protects the NSF that operates on the line, and they do deliver some things in the Albuquerque area that are poisonous by inhalation. So if we did have some kind of freight railroad crash and we released something that was poisonous by inhalant, this will kind of curtail that from happening. Also protects Amtrak that runs on the line. And then I think the third part of that I want everybody to be aware of is, the system that we're installing is the same system that the Class 1 freight industry is installing. And there is, obviously, they didn't really balk at having to do this nationwide to the level that I think some of the commuters are, like us, Nashville, Music City line. I think they see a logistical advantage to this system in the long run, and I think we'll benefit from that as a commuter rep, so.
So basically, what you're saying is that to some degree, because of the conditions that you're, and I appreciate that explanation, the conditions is that, it's sort of overkill for the system that we've got in New Mexico. But that there's no question that it is added value in the event that we were to have some situation that would be more like a more densely operated system, you know, whatever. So
Lieutenant Governor, important.
it's not a waste of money.
Absolutely, no, I mean, I think it's something that will benefit us, it'll obviously make us safer. I think we're extremely safe now, it's just makes.
Yeah, it's just a little overkill perhaps. So,
Yep.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, Member Brush.
Yes, sir. So will BNSF provide any financial assistance in this?
Lieutenant Governor and Member Brasher. So BNSF and the purchase agreement, when the state purchased the line, there's some specific clauses in there that eliminate them from having any financial responsibility for the implementation of this. However, there will be an ongoing maintenance part of this, and we work closely with DOT in both use agreements that they have with BNSF and with Amtrak. And we are looking at kind of adjusting those so that each one of those pays a fair share for the maintenance of the system going forward. And we've had really positive feedback from both BNSF and Amtrak in those preliminary negotiations on this. So I think they'll be in there, but I think, you know, the purchase of this railroad was made before 2008 when this legislation went into effect. I think BNSF was probably a little ahead of the game, and this was coming. And had that clause put in there specifically that eliminated them from having any financial responsibility. With that said, I do want to say that they've been a good partner. You know, we negotiated with them. They were willing to do some of the engineering work for us at their cost and provide some of the materials for the wayside. And so when I say engineering, it's only for the wayside piece of this. So the overlay on the signal system itself. And then they were willing to provide us access to you know, their nationwide stores and buy material from them at cost. We've kind of decided not to go down that road because the savings to us was minimal, and I think that when you look at the contract and how we have the contract priced and estimated to us, we'll probably be paying $800,000 more, but we'll have one single source that we'll be negotiating with, rather than having anybody that be able to point the finger at BNSF and say they didn't provide things in time, or the engineering that they did was insufficient and didn't take into account some things on your territory. So we felt like it was in our best interest to make sure that we were dealing with one party only.
So that's an $800,000 cut. What is the revenue for the rail line?
So, Lieutenant Governor and Member Brasher, on the federal government side, and I'll try and run through this, so we get two fixed guideway.
Well, just in terms of ridership.
In terms of ridership, so currently we're averaging around 2,600 boardings a day during the average weekday. Our ridership for the year is right around 800,000.
And in terms of dollars?
In terms of dollars, right around $2.5 million a year.
So $2.5 million a year, and this we're spending how much?
$58 million.
$58 million.
Yes.
And that's just part of the expenses. I mean, do you ever get to a point where you say, we need to think about this really?
So Lieutenant Governor and Member Brasher, I think a couple of things there. There was a gross receipts tax that was passed in the counties that it operates in. I think for us, you know, we're hopeful. We've kind of seen the economy here start to turn around. We've kind of seen job gains over the last couple of years. I think when this first went out before the crash, the service was a well-used service. I think it provides a really good alternate to I-25.
Well, at its peak.
At its peak.
When everyone was running, did it cover its expenses?
No. No. And I just want to say that.
Will this ever cover its expenses?
No, and really no public transportation ever does. So,
but
the disparity in the expenses versus the revenue.
Pretty amazing. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Governor. This is not installed.
What happened?
Lieutenant Governor and Member Aragon, the rail runner right now will be shut down, is what we've been told by the Federal Railroad Administration. They have the ability to begin imposing fines, and the fines, I think that we've looked at, would amount to about $47,000 a day, which means that we just wouldn't run, we would shut down. Now, it all remains to be seen because we're not the only one in this boat on the passenger rail side. You know, there's a lot of passenger railroads nationwide that are you know, kind of in the same boat. They're not going to be installed by the end of the year, and it remains to be seen what FRA is going to do with that.
Governor, in the event that this was shut down, what does the enabling legislation require in terms of the status of rail runners?
So Lieutenant Governor and Member Aragon, I think the state would still be on the hook to service the debt for the capital project that's in place. And I think Larry might like to add some things to this.
Lieutenant Governor and Member Aragon, and because of the purchase and sale agreement with Burlington Northern, there's still the obligation on the city, for the state of Mexico to install an equivalent system. The rail runner infrastructure, meaning the actual system itself, would shut down, and that is operated under an agreement between the Rio Metro Regional Transportation and the Department of Transportation. But the Department of Transportation in the state of New Mexico would still have maintenance obligations and including IPTMS or PTC, which is what we're talking about, that they would have to install, and so the state of New Mexico actually would have an increased financial burden that they wouldn't have with the rail runner operator.
Would that be one time as opposed to the rail runner being in perpetuity?
Lieutenant Governor Sanchez, remember, no, because you still have ongoing maintenance obligations that they would annually have to pay, plus the ongoing maintenance for the positive train control, which right now are being borne by the Rio Metro Regional Transit District.
But the rail runner still loses money every year, based on right. So it's a matter of,
correct, that's correct.
It's a matter of how we want to lose money.
Lieutenant Governor and Mayor, Member Aragon, I mean, I think it's important that there's, you know, Rio Metro Regional Transit District is using its proceeds, and the proceeds from the federal government for this. I mean, there's no money, the only thing that the state's got burdened with is issuing bonds that were out there for the capital piece. And so we've operated in the black with the revenues that we have coming in. You know, and they're all the revenues that were contemplated when the tax went out and when we started service. I mean, what we have coming in includes not only the fare box that we collect, but it includes usage fees for BNSF and Amtrak. It includes the gross receipts that's paid in the counties that it operates in. And it includes about $18 million a year in federal revenues that are completely tied to the operation of that train in the state of New Mexico. It's not a diversion of any funds that come to the state. It's all new funds that come to the state.
Well, I understand that, but the legislation that enabled the rail runner to implement essentially pigeonholes everyone to, if you don't do this, we still have these obligations just because of how the legislation was drafted, which I would venture to say a lot of folks in the state find frankly repugnant, including this person. But anyhow, I mean, that is how it was passed, and it got passed and signed into law. So what else can you say about it?
So basically, I heard you say that with or without the rail runner, the Rio Metro system has to put the system in.
So Lieutenant Governor and Member Archuleta, so regardless of whether we're running or not, it needs to go in, yes.
Because of contractual
Obligations with the
Thank you.
I'd like to ask, we talked about BNSF, what about Amtrak? Do they have any obligation, participation in, since they're using the line?
So Lieutenant Governor, like I said earlier, I mean, we've been in early negotiations with them on kind of the recurring costs and the maintenance of the system and reworking their gross ton mile usage fee that they pay on the line. They've been really amenable to all the conversations that we've had in regard to that. In regard to the capital piece, no. You know, they're really on a nationwide basis. They've got a lot of leeway on where they're running, what they're able to do. There is a lot of talk, I think, in this state on some of the pieces where they're the only operator. You know, that's the piece from about Seeping Madrid or Rainey to the state border. where I know that, they've talked about, eliminating service and some other things. I think the DOT is probably in a better position to comment on that than I am. And I think the DOT's here, but I think, it's pretty tough for them in kind of their tight financial deal to free up any money. And, this is a railroad that we run on, that BNSF runs on, and they have a right to run on based on their national charter, so.
Yeah, I mean, so there's just a lot of hopes and assumptions and wishes that, we're gonna find support and help and, barter and trade and, free tickets. Right. Yeah. I guess we could all look back. I mean, there are those of us who serve on this board who, I guess, question, and there's nothing really we can do about it now. The digital agreement with BNSF and what the state of New Mexico is on the hook for, it just seemed like that particular agreement was just, well, I don't think, in my opinion, personal opinion, it was not in the state's best interest. I hear it as I travel the state, and I've been on the rail runner before, and I hope for success. I live in Fernando County. Member Brash and I were just talking about, how long this gross receipts tax that that those counties are now obligated for it. And that's a question I have for y'all. How long, is there a sunset on that gross receipts tax?
Lieutenant Governor, there's not.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I guess those are my only comments, not so much questions, but comments. Yes, Member Brasher.
So you're in the black now. Do you have the new the bus system that's actually the AC line goes up and down? What new bus system is that under?
So Lieutenant Governor, Member Brasher, that is not under the Rio Metro Regional Transit District umbrella. That is solely a city of Albuquerque project, and they're paying for 100% of that.
Well, I want to speak on behalf of the city, but I think we could make that available to you. Thank you very much.
But you must be working close with the city of Albuquerque and their transit system as they.
Lieutenant Governor, they're a member of our board. They have representation on the board. We contribute $5 million annually to their fixed route service within the area, but they're solely responsible for the management of it, and our contribution does not include anything at the moment with the art project.
Well, very well. Any other further questions, comments?
I certainly like the idea of letting them take over the art project.
Governor.
We may ask for a sobriety test on you right now. Okay. All right. Does staff have any comments, questions, or additions?
Lieutenant Governor, members of the board, there is a contingency on this, and it's the closing of the state infrastructure project.
Well, very good. I will, at this point, entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Opposed.
Very well. Thank you very much for the presentation. Motion passes. I understand that our folks from Mora County are here, so we're actually going to go back. Reminder, this is item number 14. I'll read it back into the record. Mora County requests approval of amended lease of real property located at number 10 Courtyard Drive in Mora to the administration office of the court. $10,000 per month. It's good to see our the county commission. I'm glad you made it. Were you in a state vehicle as well? All right, so I'm going to have you go ahead and introduce yourselves once again, and then proceed with the presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Paula Garcia. I'm the chairwoman of the Mora County Commission. Good morning. And today, our team includes Luis Campos from the Administrative Office of the Court, who's the facilities manager. We also have Carl Brooks, who's the new deputy director from the AOC. We also have Evan Kent from RBC Capital Markets and Daniel also, he's our bond counsel.
Good. Well, go ahead and proceed, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you on behalf of Mona County regarding the Mona County complex. Our team today is here to give you an update on the project and to answer any questions. As you may recall, Mona County is proceeding toward completion of the project in phases. The purpose of our presentation today is to request approval from the Board of Finance for an updated lease agreement between Mona County and the National Development Court for a magistrate court. The lease was initially approved by the Board of Finance in January 2018. Since then, we obtained approval for financing from the New Mexico Finance Authority. The interest rate was reduced to 3.41%. Rate is for a fixed term of 29 years. A fixed rate for a term of 29 years. These changes are beneficial to Mona County, saving us $343,000 over the term of the loan. As reported to the Board of Finance in January, structural mediation was completed in 2017. We are nearly complete with the county office space, with substantial completion date of October 15, 2018. The design for the magistrate court is complete. With approval from the Board of Finance for the updated lease, we can close the loan and proceed with construction. According to our current schedule, we expect substantial completion by January 15, 2019. Mona County is proceeding with legal action against 3 named defendants who designed and built the shell phase for the project prior to 2011. Franklin Construction, Hands Engineering, and Ortega and Associates Architects. The county's claims are focused on defective design and construction of the county complex. The county's claims are in the discovery process with Franklin Construction and Hands Engineering responding, and the county responded to their request of life person. Ortega Architect has not responded to the county's complaint, and the county is proceeding to seek a default judgment against them. Franklin has joined 9 subcontractors to the lawsuit, and those trades that Franklin believes perform work related to various types and defects. Having the contractors joined to the lawsuit will facilitate investigation of the construction defects, but it has slowed the pace of litigation. The case is pending in the Fourth Judicial District Court. Questions regarding the lease or the financing can be directed to Lee Campos from AOC or Evan Kiss, our financial advisor, or Daniel Alsop, our bond counsel. Thank you for your consideration.
Anybody else want to make comments as far as presentation? No? Let's, yes, Member Aragon, please.
Thank you, Governor. I just want to compliment you for pursuing the litigation against those folks. I think that the conduct perpetrated by those individuals who you named, quite possibly some was repugnant in every way in the front of the taxpayers in Mona County. And it's refreshing to see someone in your position to take the action that you're taking. I just want to congratulate you on that. I've seen that structure out there, and it's shocking and frankly criminal. I'm surprised the Attorney General hasn't looked into it further for criminality, but certainly what you're doing on the civil side is to be commended, and there should be more public officials willing to do this. I just want to credit that. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from the board? Rasher.
So they did work at the direction of food. Did AOC provide any oversight of this?
Mr. Chair, Member Brasher, yes, AOC is our fiscal agent and has complete oversight over the project.
They named in the lawsuit?
Oh, on the lawsuit. The main plaintiff.
Well, we sort of talked about the professionals who provided the service, but in fairness, they must have received some guidance from people who are experts in this, and AOC should be the expert in this. What was AOC's role in this? In this structure? I mean, they do this, they're professionals, this is what they do.
Lieutenant Governor Member Brasher, AOC had no participation in any of the design that went forward at the beginning. So all of that was done with Mona County by itself. AOC has entered into this as we've been renovating and doing the phases to correct.
So they started building on their own without any Any input from AOC at all?
That is correct.
You were aware that this work was going on?
No, we were not correct, we were not aware of any construction or anything that was happening within Warner County when they were designing the district court phase of the
In the
courthouse.
budget policy process, they don't provide any documentation saying this is what we're doing.
Let me go to Duffy Rodriguez.
Mr. Chairman, member, Brasher, no, AOC was not involved in that whole original process. The legislature made the appropriations directly in Long County. The county was the fiscal agent at the time for the project. It was only after several things happened with the project, the delays, bad construction, that the legislature then asked AOC to step in and get involved. So that's just been recently that they've been involved in the process.
So then they did know that. They knew when the legislation was passed.
The appropriation was not made to them, it was made to Moore County.
That's right, but that's a public process, so I'm assuming that it's a court, it's in your area, but so you had no way of getting any information?
That,
Mr. Chairman, Member Brasher, that's a good question. It's an important part of the history of the project, and the shell was completed prior to 2011. I wasn't commissioner at the time, but I had the same questions, and I think we all struggle with how this project has gone so awry. And your question gets to the heart of that. The fact is that Moore County was operating without any oversight, and the professionals that they contracted with to assist them in building this very important facility in Moore County, we built it through their due diligence. But during that time, Moore County was receiving appropriations directly from the state legislature, and they did not consult with AOC. I confirmed that. That was one of my first questions when I became a county commissioner. I asked, why, first of all, there were two courthouses in the same building, one of the district, one of the magistrate. And my first question was, who approved this, or why is it this way? And it turned out that there hadn't been a consultation with the magistrate court, with AOC and with AOC specifically. So I think part of the problem was that Moore County was operating without good communication with the parties that were stakeholders in the project. And that was one of the major mistakes that was made by the commission and the administration at that time, as well as the professionals that we were working with.
Well, and the intent isn't here to blame, but for the going forward, there needs to be a little bit better coordination so that when these facilities are built, they address the needs of the court from a number of different issues. We've seen the court facilities where they're not safe, secure, and they don't address the needs of the people. And the concept of increased communication is important. Thank you.
Yes, Member Rochelle.
Madam Chair, have you, in talking about this with the professionals that Moore County engaged, because Moore County is the grantee, they're the ones that ran the project, et cetera. Then they hired someone to help them, and I assume that was an architectural firm. Was there a programming phase? Do you know what I mean by programming?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and Member Archuleta, there was a programming phase, and that was in the appropriate time to consult.
Right, to determine the size of the facility and what tenants were going to occupy and how big a space they needed. All that coordination you're talking about.
One of the things, Mr. Chair and Member Archuleta said that when the shell was completed and when I entered office and my colleagues entered office, we knew that we needed to provide a safe facility for the community, and the option that we preferred was to finish this structure. And the first thing we did was to reach out to our legislators to ask them, what's the status, can we get more money? The architect at the time And I called him and I said, what's the status? He said, everything's done, yep, the plans are done, everything's been chosen for you down to the color of the paint. All you need to do is go get money. Ask the legislature was very reluctant to support the project for obvious reasons. They said, look, you had 5.6 million, we blew that on an empty shop. And so it took several months to get our bearings and figure out that AOC hadn't been consulted. By the following year, we had established a partnership, and we were starting to approach the legislature jointly. And by 2013, we had established a joint powers agreement that delegated all decision-making to the AOC for the entire project, not just the court phase, but the whole thing. And for Mona County, that partnership was really crucial to getting the project moving. It gave the project some credibility. It brought in some expertise that we simply didn't have. We're a small county. And it was the best thing that ever happened to the project was to get the AOC involved. When they got involved, we did the JPA, then we did the fiscal agent agreement. And then when there was legislative money, it was appropriated to Mona County with the contingency that AOC was making the decisions on the project.
See, and the reason I asked about programming, I mean, you answered yes if there was a program, but probably a programming base for your space, not for the overall building. Is that right?
Well, Mr. Chair and Member Schmidt, there was a programming base for the original building as designed by the original architect was Ortega. So Ortega carried out a programming.
But if there was a programming phase, how come it's empty?
Well, they did a programming phase that resulted in a design for 44,000 square feet, and that was unrealistic. And so when they realized they didn't have enough money to complete it, in the shell, we had to do another programming phase. We had to reprogram completely because we we're gonna do a phase approach, we're only gonna do one courtroom. And all the spaces compressed so that we could meet our budget. We had limited resources, we needed to meet it.
You know, Governor, I've talked about this before in talking about capital outlay and what is partly what is wrong with capital outlay and what is wrong with some of these appropriations, et cetera. And it's that we don't take the time in this state to require, to mandate that a local government, of any size, a local government starts out with a planning document that justifies the project. We go get money, somebody comes up with some idea and they say, well, how about 2 million? No, just call it 4. Let's do whatever. And then pretty soon you do everything to justify the money instead of, justifying what it is that you need. Had somebody done a real programming study there, instead of the architect justifying a big building or whatever might happen, you would then go and coordinate with AOC, you would coordinate with anybody that's gonna be a tenant, anybody that has any, is interested. You would come up with what the rental rate is going to be, how much placement there's going to be, how much somebody's willing to rent, blah, 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 and then you fill the space in the most logical way. Then you put together a construction budget and build something. That can be applied to whether it's the water project we just heard earlier, whatever it is, all of that needs to be done. I mean, I question where did they get their number for 8.5 million for a water system if they haven't tested all those springs? See, all of that should be tested and somebody should say, we need 16-inch line here or 12-inch line here, et cetera. And I bet you not one document exists, just somebody, doing that. And it's so much worse in capital outlay where the idea is, somebody comes up with something to help the constituent, which I understand. Okay, but there should be requirements at the state level so that it doesn't fall on people that don't have any expertise whatsoever. But instead say, yeah, we got you like 5.6 million, sounds great. Now they're in a mess. Right. And instead of, you can't go say, I'm gonna build would I like a $2 million house? Yes, but whether I can afford it or not is a different thing.
Well, I think, Member Archuleta, what you described, and I guess for those of us who serve on this board who are elected officials, let's just call it what it is. It's politics, is what it comes down to. We can describe it in any other form, but look, whether it be the courthouse, and we've kind of danced around the issue. We just had, let's be clear about this. This was a politically motivated decision that was made. And we're now dealing with it. And we see this happen throughout all of state government, all of it. And the Hispanic culture, we call them Movida. That's what it comes down to. So whether it be the courthouse here or the rail runner, you know, some would even say the spaceport. It is what it is. And so whether it be the capital outlay, you know, when I first got elected to the legislature almost 20 years ago, I introduced a bill that would reform capital outlay. And I'm telling you, I was average height, I walked out of there much shorter because they beat me up. You know, they did, they beat you up. And so until the state of New Mexico changes its culture, political culture, and revamp all of these things, we're going to continue to have these problems here. It's just the way it is.
I have a question. Can I just make a comment? But if a planning document was required, if in this state we had a venue where we took some of the capital outlay and said, we're going to set aside 10% of the money that's available, and we're going to make it a requirement. There's a planning document for everybody to read, all the budgets to be there, that the projects, anybody that, you don't have to be an engineer or a construction expert or whatever to go in and see that project going to cost this much. And you could build a phase for $1 million and then the next phase for this much and it will get you this or this. Until if that was a requirement, then at least it would help everybody in the room get on the same level to start with, as opposed to nobody knowing, you know, what's right or what's wrong. Is it 5 million, 10 million, or 1 million?
Yeah, but you know, in the perfect world, member Archuleta, I think you're absolutely right. But in the political world, that's either going to have to be a statute, which means a piece of legislation, and when you go to do that, it's going to die because they don't want to give up. And I understand, as people who have to represent particular districts, and I represent a particular district, you want to bring as much capital outlay back to your project. You want to ensure that's what you're sent to Santa Fe to do. But in the long-term best interest of the state, until we change the political process of how capital outlay, how these projects are funded, how we require the procurement process, all those things that take place that we as a board have to deal with almost on a regular basis. And we can going back 8 years and just list project after project that it's unfortunately and sadly very similar to what we see here.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, if I might, we struggle with that at EFA with capital outlay recommendations that we then have to implement to local government or capital outlay bureau. Now, on the state agency side, you know, they have to have 5-year plans, they have to have planning documents. We're getting ready in a few weeks to have those hearings. We have public hearings on agencies coming forward with their list of requests, and then the group prioritizes them, ranks them, etc. None of that happens with local projects, and that's where everything kind of falls through the crack. But I will say that DFAs work closely with AOC, particularly because of what happened with this project, and some other issues with the varying rates for lease payments for magistrate courts. And so AOC has worked very closely with us to make sure that whether it's like building a building, that their standards and their needs are put in place in the programming of their new facilities. So hopefully going forward, we won't have another incident like this particularly.
Well, let me ask you, Secretary, is that a requirement? Is that a requirement? Is that administrative rule or is it a statute? To have, in the case, we'll just use AOC to be required to work in the planning process, and as Member Archuleta said, the program, is that required? And is it just, if it's not in statute, has it not been codified in statute, or if it's rule, or if it's an administration priority, in less than 60 days, we're gonna have a new administration elected, and all that could change. So, what is it?
Mr. Chair, it's really just administrative
right
cooperation between DFA and AOC and of course LFC and anyone else that participates in the
Right.
development process.
So unfortunately, we may have a new administration that is seated on January 1st of 2019 who doesn't see it that way and simply says, no, it's not a priority. Or a secretary of DFA who says, I'm not interested. And then do we fall back into that?
I might observe that the Supreme Court considers that responsibility to work with DFA very closely, and preparing our capital requests is an important understanding, and the political results are really not as important. The Supreme Court is doing it right, making sure that the right size facilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. But again, I think that's all based on intent and goodwill and cooperation. But until, and it's been my experience over the last 20 years being involved in public services, that unless it's in statute and it's forced, then it is at the opinion and at the discretion of an administration, and they can work around it.
Mr. Chairman, we do have an executive order that the governor issued back in 2015 as part of trying to enforce these requirements. And every year, the governor and DFA have put forward a capital outlay reform package.
Yeah.
We've worked with Think New Mexico. We've worked with any entities who are willing to participate with us, and we've never been.
And what are the results? Yeah. Never makes it out of the legislature desk, up to the governor's desk. Let me have the tell me.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that AFC is doing this year is that we're asking for some capital outlay. We're putting together a standard manual for both district court and magistrates, so we can set up the minimum standards of what court sizes should be, which will help us in our beginning, and ask the court to approve that recommendation. And then from there, we'll start working on a 5-year master plan for all our magistrate courts. Where do we want to go within the next 5 years? And that's something that we've been talking as we're looking for funding. How do we begin putting a 5-year master plan that we could then begin talking about placing it for all of the judiciary?
And that's fantastic, but that should be, and I congratulate ALC for doing that, but unless that's codified in statute where it says you must, not that you may, right? That you must. To your point, Member Archuleta, every one of these projects, and whether it be the AOC, whether it be higher ed, whether it be, look, I'm dealing with a situation in the public schools where a school is being built today where they didn't put the IT in. They did not wire this school today for internet service for connectivity in 2018. And when you talk to the people, they say, well, yeah, we just didn't think about it. We didn't think about it. And now in order to do it again, it's going to cost a ridiculous amount of money. And yet we talk about providing tools for our kids for education. How does that happen? You know?
Lack of programming.
Thank you.
I will say, it sounds to me, Madam Secretary, that things have really improved, because I remember sitting here early on here on this board, listening to the governor talk about the problems with one facility is paying a large amount of money in rent and the other is paying less, and they couldn't make any sense out of it. And it sounds like we're moving in the right direction. So I think that's good. You're being congratulated.
Yes, by all means. We're looking backwards, right? And that's unfortunate because it's frustrating, because we're having to deal. And I don't want to get too far because we're going to take a look here soon. But I think it's important that within, we got 3 months or so to go on this particular board. And we try to be as diligent as possible and making good decisions for the taxpayer ultimately, right? And to help the county like more so that you don't fall, because I know that you guys have to raise your gross receipts tax and it's going to burden money, and we don't want to do that. We want every county to have an equal amount of state resources going to it, right? So that they're not burdened, especially counties that don't have that ability to do so. But it's frustrating to see that, and we're hoping that in the handoff to the new administration and whoever sits at this table, from January 1, that they continue to find that. So, but before let me go to Member Aragon.
Thank you, Governor. Just a couple of questions, because I've actually practiced with that sort of courthouse y'all have for magistrate. It's frankly dangerous. You're like 2 feet from, the judge is 2 feet from the defendant. It's absolutely, I don't know how y'all function without problems. So, when is that going to be done? On a serious note, I don't practice up there frequently, but the times I've been up there to practice, it is astonishing that someone hasn't got hurt. I've seen people come in properly restrained, but nonetheless literally 2 to 3 feet from the judge, and there's no protection, sitting at the judge's desk, and we're sitting on the other side of the judge's desk as are the prosecutors. When is the anticipated date?
Mr. Chairman, and member of the board,
And I think I described it
substantial
pretty accurately.
yeah, your comments are very well taken. The existing court is in a single wide trailer. The judge's chambers is in the master bedroom. It's really, it's about a fourth the size of this room.
The table.
And even smaller. I mean, it's really small and maybe 100 square feet. And the judge sits at a desk and he holds court with the defendant, and it can get dangerous. There's no room for the public to be in there. To answer your question, the new magistrate court substantial completion date is January 15th of 2019. So we see some data, and it's because of the work that AOC has done to work with Warren County on the lease, which is the subject of our presentation today. We've been able to use the lease to get a loan from MFA and do construction. And I think it's also helped what I told you learn a lot, build our capacity for the future. My term is ending, but I'm hoping to leave some institutional memory to my successors about how to work with partners and how to engage state agencies, how to be more responsible in the planning process. And so, I mean, the outcome of this effort is going to be that we will have a facility that we will occupy, first the county offices by the end of October and the court by January 2019.
And that's really good news for, I think, the safety of the citizens of Warren County, and also for being independents, just because of the nature of what the magistrate does. A couple of other questions, and this is what I did not understand about what you're asking. In your letter that you sent to the board, you indicated that a lease agreement and a loan would be refinanced 10 years after closing. But I'm calculating that the base rent that the administrative office of court is going to be paying is essentially enough to service the debt in totality. Am I wrong on that? Or would there be a necessity for refinance after 10 years?
Mr. Chairman, and I'm really glad you asked that question because the lease that you're referring to, that the terms are trying to refinance after 10 years, that was in the previous lease. We have since gone to MFA and gotten approval from them, so we no longer have to refinance after 10 years. But I'll let either Evan or Daniel talk about the terms of that.
And as you're addressing that, my question is, will this 10-year lease be enough to service in totality whatever is out there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board Member Aragon, the lease that was approved by this board previously in December or January 17 or 18. At that point, it was contemplated that a financing would be done with, the source of financing would be a bank in Colorado. And the terms of that financing would require a balloon payment at 10 years and refinancing unless somehow that money appeared. Since then, we have worked with the Finance Authority and obtained approval from the Finance Authority for a loan to the Finance Authority. And under that loan, the 10-year balloon payment does not exist. So it's just a 29-year fixed rate loan. And so the term of the lease is 30 years with, I think, 2 5-year options. And so the lease provides for the finance, or provides for the payments of the loan agreement for the life of the loan.
In totality, so when the lease is up, the payments, the amount owed will be paid.
Yes, sir.
And that's what I was looking for, and I congratulate you on that, based on where we were a couple of years ago. I just point out, Governor, that I was in the legislature in 1979. I was in the finance committee, and we got to work with some really brilliant people. They reacted very lucky on some really nominal lines. And the problem that Member Archuleta talked about, and the problem that you alluded to, and certainly the problem that the governor was trying to address during throughout her tenure, was prevalent back then. And sadly, the status quo has remained the status quo. And it's so deeply rooted and institutionalized in various government entities that it would take a major, as you say, a different state of mind to change that, because it has been the same thing since 1979 and having served through that. In that process, in the appropriation process. And back then, everything ran through appropriations and finance, every capital budget, everything, including taxes, after tax and revenue. And I wish I could say, Member Archuleta, that there's substantial hope at the end of the tunnel. I just don't see that happening. And I think every once in a while, we'll be addressing these types of horrendous, what I consider acts of criminality on the part of folks who initiated this process and saw it through. And it's really, really disappointing to me that those people are not being held accountable, because there's no difference in what they did. It was not an act of omission, but rather an act of commission, where there was actual scientific intent to do this and defraud the people of Mora County. And it's sad that those folks aren't being prosecuted vigorously as they should be.
And I realize I'm naive, and I've never, been in the Senate or the legislature or whatever. But I think if we don't keep speaking up, it's definitely not ever gonna get fixed. But what I see is a program that is designed that has adequate planning, that program I'm talking about. And that there are requirements that we put it out on the table, that we understand the paradigm that everybody is involved in. So as the governor just said, when he was a legislator, the pressure is to bring as much money as you can back home. And I think we need to recognize that and say that, we're gonna have a priority list, but we're gonna have planning that identifies what the costs of all projects are. We're gonna have them in a list, and then we're gonna make absolutely sure that he gets his project, maybe not every year, but every second or third year. And it's fully funded, 100% funded. And that there's a checklist to make sure that the internet is available in the school system, that, that we have systems that help guide what we're doing with the very little money that we have, so that we don't have $400 or $500 million sitting there in $25,000 increments not being used. And so I totally agree with you. And I've been around long enough to know that there is a system, an inertia that has to be overcome. But if we don't get together and create a committee that says, let's take all the stakeholders' interest in mind and try to put forth something that says, no, you won't get your $450,000 this year, but you're gonna get it $900,000 next year, and your project's gonna get funded 100%. Somehow, that we figure that out. But we have to have good documents that we start with, that everybody agrees that that's a responsible price.
Well, it happened in 1985 and 86 with
Yes.
Secretary Arriaga and Senate Pro Tem President Gus Houston and Speaker Sanderson, who put about $50 million, all the capital outlay in 1976 to construct what is now Paseo del Norte.
I remember that.
Literally every dime the state had. So it does happen, but those are,
I remember that.
shiny moments that don't happen.
No, Member Rocha, I would disagree with you. You're not naive. No, really. You may not have served publicly, but in your background, both on your individual business and serving on all those boards that you did, you understand that when it comes to this type of process, that somebody in the private sector is held accountable. Right. Am I right?
Right.
Board of directors, whomever. It's not that way in the political arena. People aren't held accountable to those things that are making those. And that's really where it comes down to the cultural shift, the change and it's not partisan, because you got people on both sides of the aisle who are working hard and want to do the right thing. But until we do that, we're going to continue to be faced with these problems. And I'm hoping that there's something that shifts tremendously, because we've got great potential in the state, but we're being held back by this type of political environment that is just, and it's not just since '79, Robert, it's since 1912. It's when New Mexico became a
I'll
state.
go back to 79.
Okay.
But I can attest from 79.
And in your position, I'd say that as well.
Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, Governor. I know that we've kind of been beating up on it, but I kind of like to just throw our accolades to the Commissioner, because every time you brought a presentation, you were well informed, and you obviously care about the mission that you're doing for us. And, you don't see that very often. And especially as a chairman of the county commission, to be as knowledgeable as you are, the depth that you are. It's just refreshing.
You're lucky to have
And, you know, County is, I'm sorry that you're leaving. You just said, you don't have enough times. And if everybody's done, I'll go ahead and move approval of the, I believe into these.
So I have a motion, a second. I'm gonna go to Donna though to talk a little bit about some staff.
So approval should be contingent upon the New Mexico Finance Authority law closing.
I would be happy to add that.
Yes, Member Thacker.
And remember, Treasurer, I think we ought to at least send a note to the county and AOC, whoever's responsible, they can sort that out. But again, mention what we did the last time this came before us, that we have some safety concerns. And I don't think we ought to be silent on that. I know they're gonna have a new facility fairly soon, but we ought to at least, note that in our meeting, we discussed that there are some potential safety problems over there, and that we ought to communicate to whoever the responsible party is that we have some concerns.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is when the move is taken, after the move takes place, that those safety concerns have been mitigated. Right now, the next 2 months, you're still in a trailer, you're still in a.
You're in one room.
Right, I know what a single wide looks like.
Yeah, the court is in one room.
Well, but I think that the commissioner can take that back.
And I'm fine with, I think you ought to, I think somebody ought to, and we ought to know that there may be a problem, because it doesn't matter if it's 1 week and suddenly something happens and they say, well, is this the least curious group out there? We really ought to make note of this potential for a problem. And then if you feel it's not important, you guys run the operation.
We're going to rely on your sending back that message clearly to the position on the commission. Well, very good. Let's move on. So we have a motion with the contingency and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Moving on, let's go. We have item number 16, State Personnel Office. Request approval of temporary transfer of 23 human resource employees and 3 vacant positions to the State Personnel Office, CYFD, pursuant to NMSA 1978, 10-7-1. Are they here? All right, go. There we go.
Try to get in the door.
We're going to go ahead and get set up, and then if you will introduce yourself for the record, and we just want to compliment you on that killer clap. Very nice.
Gotta have fun times.
Yes, by all means, go ahead.
Good morning, Lieutenant Governor, members of the board. My name is Justin Ujeka, and I'm the Director of the State Personnel Office. And with me, I have Ms. Elena Tercero. She is the ASD Director of the Children and Families Department. Good morning. So thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and present on behalf of Governor Martinez a request for your approval to temporarily transfer to the State Personnel Office 23 human resource employees, 3 vacant positions, and all accompanying resources from the Children and Families Department. So as you may remember, on February 22nd, 2017, Governor Martinez issued Executive Order 2017-002, intended to centralize and consolidate the state's human resource functions under the State Personnel Office for classified employees. The request before you today is consistent with the executive order and complies with the State Personnel Act. So this is the 3rd time that I've appeared before this board regarding HR consolidation. The first time was in January, a request to transfer staff in HR positions and resources to Sbof. June, here before you again to reauthorize the same transfer through FY19. And then today, a request to transfer an additional 26 filled and vacant positions from CYFD to be the 38th agency that is part of our consolidation, joining the obviously under 37. So through our consolidation efforts, if we include CYFD in this count, since 2016, we've reduced the number of employees who were performing HR services, the number of HR FTE in these 38 agencies from 253 FTE to 108 FTE. So we have been really working hard. The consolidation we feel is going very well. Of course, there's going to be a couple hiccups here and there, but with a job of this magnitude. So the Children, Youth, and Families Department is the first non-general fund agency to join our consolidated model. And Mr. Cerro is with me today to discuss the specific funding issues. But I would like to point out that we would not be here today making this request if it were not for her outstanding work on CYFD's federal reimbursement formula. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Cerro.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor, members of the board, so just a high level briefing of our federal funding. Originally, when we looked at this information, our program support division receives 32% of federal funding for all of the work that we do. But when you dig down deeper into each of the levels, we found out that these 26 employees that we're currently requesting to transfer over only request a 6% reimbursement of that federal dollar. So it started out as $566,000 of what we thought, and it ended up being $114,000. So in this first quarter, we're gonna have about a $26,000 difference of federal funding that we will not receive. However, we're already working on our cost allocation plan to be able to bring in this additional funding. In 30 days, we actually will start that. And right now, just from a programmatic perspective, we're looking at a $3 million increase to our federal revenue that we'll be able to, that's allocable and allowable from our federal funding.
Any more before we go forward? No? All right, let me go to member Audubon, please.
Thank you, Governor. Just a couple of questions, Mr. Secretary. When this process is completed, or at least until December 31st of this year, what would be the net cost savings to the state by consolidating the various departments that you all have consolidated?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Member Aragon, by the time, just through vacancy savings alone, over the last 2 years, we'll save $10 million.
And this consolidated department, long-term?
Mr. Chairman,
Would that be recurring?
That would be a recurring cost of about $5 million a year, but that's not even including the efficiencies that we've been achieving through reduced, lack of a better term, less bureaucracy in our processes. We're streamlining every process that we do. We're streamlining forms. There was one large agency, there were 12 steps of review in trying to get a single personnel action through a reclassification or a in-pay band request. Now we've limited that down to about 5 to 6 review steps along the way for the consolidated agencies. And once we expand to more agencies like CYFD, that number will just keep growing. So we've seen efficiencies in our time savings with our call center. We've seen a reduction in the number of steps or process. We've seen an increase in consistency with, for example, disciplinary actions, letters of reprimand to a notice of contemplated action to a notice of final action. All that is coming through one shop, and so we're still calculating the actual efficiency savings, and we'll have that ready later this fall. But we expect to see, we've seen improvements in every area with efficiency and cost savings.
And the Governor, Mr. Secretary, I'm not sure that you will be before us between now and the end of the year. And certainly before I leave the board in December, I would really like to know what the net cost savings through these efforts will be moving forward. And I think your office, Governor, and your office, and the Secretary, and the Governor's efforts are to be commended for taking a common sense step. Congratulations on what you do.
Thank you. Mr. Governor, this member, everyone, we'd be happy to share that information. We will publish that information as we move forward and get ready for transition.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Corman.
So as I understand it, initially you thought that the financial impact from your inability to bill the feds for the program would be 32%, which is what, about $500,000 roughly?
Lieutenant Governor, board member, yes, that is correct. So from from a division perspective, we received 32%, and all of these calculations were done before I started with CYFD. So when I started digging into it and really learning about the cost allocation, that's where you have to break it down.
So now you've looked at it, and the impact in terms of your lack of ability to assess the federal government
Is it 6%?
6%, which is close to
It's
$20,000 a month.
$114,000 for a fiscal year, including benefits. So from a quarterly perspective, you're looking at about $28,000.
So where are these positions? Well, where would they be budgeted? Will they be budgeted in CYFD, yet they are physically at the state personnel office?
I can answer that. Mr. Governor, Member McCormick, yes, they would still, until we get the legislation through and passed, that's how it would work. These dollars would still be at the Children, Youth, and Families Department.
So did you approach the legislature this year with the reorganization and the financial aspects of the billing for services?
Yes, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Governor, Mr. McCormick, yes, we did. We had a bill running on each side of the House, one on the House, one on the Senate, and it made it through the first committee. It did not get out into a second committee. We were late in getting the bill introduced.
Late? I don't understand that.
We should have had that bill ready to go and ready to drop pre-session. However, we did not drop it until about a week into the session, and it's a short 30 days.
Was that the legislature's fault, or was that you hadn't done your front-end work?
Mr. Governor, Mr. McCormick, we were still working on the specific language with the legislation. There were a couple of unanswered questions that we were still working with at the time. We were able to resolve those early in the session, but we just were not able to, there's just not enough time to get that bill passed.
So going into the next round, were any of the budget requests, when you made your budget request for fiscal year 2020, did you basically assume that you would have these positions funded and appropriated in the state personnel office, or were the positions assumed to continue to be in CYFD?
Mr. Governor, Mr. McCormick, the budgets were submitted by each agency with the FTE and their originating agency. We did not propose a consolidated Sbof budget, nor did we remove the FTE from other agencies' budget requests because we did not. That was the decision that was made.
And what were the questions the legislature had with regard to the project? I mean, if it's such a great idea, what happened that derailed it?
Mr. Governor, Mr. McCormick, I believe it was just during the last year of the administration, I know there were several issues, several items that did not go forward. I think, one was the 911 call center that was in the same position. However, we've had to move forward, DFA and do it, had to move forward on that. I was in front of the legislature on August 22nd, and I gave them an update, and I did not really get any pushback from any of the legislative members. I think they all thought it was a good idea. That's all the feedback that I've received. I have spoken with Director Abby on many occasions, and we're just providing updates as we go. And the goal is to introduce new legislation this next year to finish out this project.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Treasurer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on your consolidation, you're keeping about 40% of the employees that transfer over. What are you doing with the other 60%?
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, Ms. Reichenberg, those are positions that we're leaving vacant that we are not filling at the agency level. And in some cases, we have transferred those positions out of HR into other areas or reallocated. For example, we started out with 484 FTE doing HR work. Some of them were doing it as 20% of their job, 50% of their job, and 100% of their job. So we took that number of 484. We took away all of the people out in the field, these coordinators. They're maybe in an office, they're doing 10, 20, 50% of their work. Now they're able to allocate all of their time to non-HR duties. And then, so that took us from 484 to 348. And currently we have about 225 filled right now. So we are not filling those positions. It's really the agency's decision on how to use that funding right now. They can use it for direct programs. They can save it to, work through their, maintain a certain vacancy rate, and not fill that position at all.
Mr. Chairman, Children, Youth, and Families has gotten the name in the newspaper an awful lot for the last few years. How is this going to impact their recruitment of qualified social workers? All of a sudden you're taking 23 people, you're going to reduce that considerably. What are you doing in the state personnel office to step up your efforts to see that they're properly staffed in order to provide the services that they're required?
Lieutenant Governor, Member Reichenberg, we have been working with those individuals. We met with them over a year ago. We worked with those 26 individuals and I identified which center of excellence they were going to go to. And we also identified from the recruitment perspective, we're going to be leaving 2 people there at the agency. Their job is only going to be focusing on CYFD, social workers and caseworkers, as they're doing now. So there will be no decrease in service. And as they get rolled into the bigger model, the individuals who are HR generalists will be slotted in each of the different areas. I believe 4 or 5 positions, HR generalists, are now going to be slotted into the Talent Acquisition Center of Excellence for Recruitment. Our data that we have collected so far is we are 2.5 times faster at getting a job from the posting, the request for posting, to getting it posted with the consolidated agencies than non-consolidated agencies. So by building in to the new model, using these new processes, the CYFD will be able to take advantage of that. But our commitment is that, if an employee has an HR issue, instead of walking down the hall and sitting and talking to that person and that HR individual through, and that person has to stop what they're doing. Maybe they're working on a classification action. They have to stop, and maybe it's an FMLA question, and they don't deal with FMLA all the time. They would have to stop, maybe do a little research, answer the questions, pull the forms out. In the new model, that same employee will contact the lead management division, the Lead Management Center of Excellence. They would send an email in. That specialized person would call them back immediately, tell them where to get their form, walk them through with specialized knowledge, because that's all they do, is deal with FMLA, ADA issues. So it's really, that's where we're seeing efficiencies, is that we can get in and we can turn those actions around very quickly. So in each area, we are seeing that that opportunity. So instead of going to an HR generalist, they really just go to a specialist, get the answer they need, and then move on with whatever they're doing. And that's what a lot of people in today's society want. They want to go on their smartphone. They want to go in, they want to look up something, and then they want to get the answer and move on.
Did I hear you say this is the largest state agency? What is the total FTEs?
Lieutenant Governor, Treasurer, our FTE count is 4,000, just about 4,000.
And so, you know, a little research I know about HR, they usually say an HR person for every 100 employees. And so you're only maintaining 2 on site. You're gonna get the other 38 kind of full-time people that you really need out of SPO with their specialized services and coordinated services.
For our two, Lieutenant Governor and Treasurer, for our 2 most important. CYFD is critical regardless of protective services and early childhood services, to being the 2 most critical divisions. That's the individual that will be specialized within our divisions to be able to assist us to have those social workers in place. So we won't have, 100% of our HR staff with us. Those 2 employees definitely will become critical to that process. Within protective services, we also have the rapid hires that typically happen quarterly, which will continue to happen. And we have our request for double fills, which, also assist in that lead and lay time to be able to bring in individuals as quickly as possible.
What's your vacancy rate like that? Especially with like social workers?
I would need to pull, I have a vacancy report, but not up. I can
What was it last
grab
time?
it if you would like. I don't remember, honestly.
No.
Would you like me to?
Mr. Chair, to that point, Member Reichenberg, yesterday Secretary Jacobson had announced that the vacancy rate at CYFD had gone from 25% down to about 12.5%. So they've been able to cut it in half because they've been doing job fairs, rapid hires, double filling positions. So there's been a significant
Kind
improvement.
of falls into the category here, because for HR, you've got 12% vacancy. Okay. Thank you.
Very well. Any other questions from the board?
Yes. Just a comment that this is the kind of system that they would talk about in local government, both at the city and the county level. They're never quite able to implement. And so you had some of the larger departments handling some of this. I might think in many cases, my experience was that it was less efficient. And probably the departments had less expertise than if you had someone who does this for them. So, I mean, they all did it, but someone who is a specialist in HR. So I think this is the way to go.
Very well. Does staff want to add anything? No? No. Very well. I'll entertain a motion for second. Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Member Brasher is going to take over.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner.
5 minutes to do it. Yeah.
All right, we are now on item number 17, informational items.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Charlene Cook, and I'm the state cash manager, and treasurer. The item 17 is the monthly investment report, followed by 18, which is the quarterly investment report. And there's an exhaustive amount of detail in the packets. What I'd like to do is highlight the fact that the Stowe Investment Division earned $40 million for the state general fund in FY18. And that was compared to $25 million for FY17.
And oil and gas is like, keep that money coming in.
So that's what I wanted to present on those two agenda topics. Are there any questions?
Okay, are there any questions? Anybody want more detail? Thank you very much for your input, appreciate it.
You're welcome. We move to item 19, the broker dealer list. Historically, Stowe has created a new broker dealer list on an annual basis. And this is the list of the broker dealers with whom Stowe can conduct business, so it's an approved, reviewed list. It's a very manual process to issue those applications, to deal with all of the paperwork back and forth, whether it's electronic or hard copy, and to do all of the compliance reviews for those entities and their representatives. And so that process that was being done manually takes 6 or 7 months out of the year. And you have a brief drive, and then you start back over again. So we did an analysis to look at how consistent that list is. And there's a great deal of continuity from one year to the next. And the primary broker dealers who are heavy in the areas that we deal with are consistent. We always want the primary dealers and the secondary dealers come and go, but we tend to see those that are come back from year to year are the people who bring something to the table and that end up doing business with us. So rather than repeating this manual process every year, and there's actually nothing in statute or the investment policy that determines how frequently this list will be issued and approved. So we have extended the list that was approved by Board of Finance for FY18 through the end of FY19. And to be sure that everybody is still in compliance, we did the full compliance review in August. And we did not add any broker dealers because it was a continuing list. But we did go back through and do all the compliance checks. Some of the representatives changed as there's turnover in the industry, but all the people who are currently working with Stowe do meet all of the qualifications by statute and investment policy. So we anticipate that at the end of fiscal year 19, that we will do the full application process and create a new list, which will be approved by the treasurer and presented to the board for approval on an ongoing basis. So I didn't come asking for approval, but it is on the agenda as approval item, so I would defer to Ms. Maestas.
Let's go to staff, Ms. Rice, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, since it is listed as an approval item and we have approved this annually, I guess we can approve the current list again.
Treasurer, I think I've been having a thing you want to add before.
Like, Charlie, you guys have done a good job in the state treasurer's office, and we're lucky to have it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Treasurer. All right, so we have an item before us, which is an action item. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move to action item number 20.
All right. Action item number 20 is the state treasurer has appointed Mark Hyde as a public member for the school committee. Mark has served on the committee for many years and been very involved in state government finances and investments. And he has graciously agreed to serve another 2-year term. And I am asking for board approval for the public member appointment.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to member Archer.
I would happily move approval. Boy, they're lucky to have Mark. Mark's an outstanding citizen of the state of Mexico, and I happily move approval.
Thank you, member Archer. Do we have a second?
Second, please.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, this passes unanimously.
Thank you all very much.
We're going to move to informational item number 21, capital buildings, repair fund financial status report, July 31st, 2018 through August 31st, 2018.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the July beginning balance was $11,419,906. Ending balance for July after revenues received and budget expenditures were made was $12,115,064. And the project liabilities, which include encumbered and unencumbered projects, plus projects that were approved and have not yet been budgeted, equal $15,341,812. The ending balance for August after revenues received and expenditures was $12,149,672. The project liabilities, including encumbered and unencumbered projects, plus the not yet budgeted projects, equals $14,745,445. And let me know if you have any questions.
All right, are there any questions? Let's move on then to information item number 22.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the list of legislative capital projects and their status are on pages 2,997 to 3,000 of your electronic agenda.
Any questions? Any questions? Any grilling questions? Thank you very much. By the way, you did a good job in getting those other two items just moved along. Let's go to staff items. Informational item number 23. This is review of a resolution memorializing July 17th, 2018 forward action regarding dedication of a portion of the state gross receipts tax increment for Lower Petrovus Tax Increment Development District. And it's not.
Good morning. That's a good thing. I thought after the discussion that we had in July where you voted on this, because if you will recall, there were lots of different motions, amendments that I thought it would be a good idea to bring back to you just so that you can see what your action looks like on paper. And what I did was, in preparing and drafting this resolution, you will recall Mr. Horowitz had submitted a draft resolution with the application that the Lower Petrovus Increment District application. And so I looked at that. I also asked board staff to provide to me the what resolutions and prior approvals look like. I reviewed the minutes. Miss Berry was kind enough to transcribe that portion of the meeting where all of the voting took place, and I think that's also included in the electronic agenda. And so pulling all of those things together, I tried to find what were the key elements that the board wanted in the resolution, what you had voted on. And so what you have in front of you on page, starting at 3001 is the draft resolution. And so what it starts with is the whereases give you the history of the actual formation of the district as it went through the city of Albuquerque, and what some of those what the tax increment development plan looked like. And then starting on page 5 of the resolution, which is at 3005 of your packet, where it has the now therefore, we start with the various sections and the actual dedication. And so if you'd like, I can go through by section and just tell you what each section includes and why it's there. Section 1 are the findings that are required by the statute.
Which page is that on, would you please?
So we're on the electronic agenda starting at 3005 near the bottom, where it starts now therefore be it resolved.
Okay, everybody on page.
Okay, so there are the findings that are required by the statute to be made, and I think that you verbalized those during your vote and discussion. So that's what's included there, that the Board of Finance have reviewed the request, that and that that they have requested the 65% of the state gross receipts tax increment attributable to the imposition of gross receipts tax within that district, that it was in the reasonable and the best interest of the state, and that the use of the gross receipts tax is likely to stimulate the creation of jobs, economic opportunities, and general revenue. And those are the findings that are required by the TID Act. In section 2, we are articulates the actual dedication, which is the 65% of the increment that's generated within the district, capped at $51 million for the limited purpose of securing gross receipts tax funds.
I think it's important as we go through, I'm on section 2. The $51 million is expressed in 2018 dollars, which means that presumably if 20 years out the project is completed, that this amount will be inflated over the 20-year period, so that it can well be whatever. I want to make that observation. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
What? Yeah. That's how I read that, just because as we go through here, there's a lot of reference to 2018 dollars, which means that you're gonna see inflation, not only in terms of this one, but also presumably there will be an inflation factor that takes place when the bonds are if and when the bonds are issued. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Carmack. Member Archer.
Another one that I just will mention now, I was gonna mention it later, but that I would mention is that I think it would be good, first of all, I think you did a great job on this, laying it all out, et cetera. But in the $51 million, later in section 7, you identify that it's only for the interchanges and the frontage roads associated with the interchanges. I think it's a good idea, like even in section 2, to, whether it's parenthetical or however you do it, that says that the funds, it's $51 million, and they are only to be used for those items listed in section 7. What I would hate is for those funds to, the future interchanges or whatever cost 35 million or 25 million. And if I were voting on that, I don't mean that you get to use the other 26 million for water lines or sewer lines or whatever. It's only for those items. So I think ad nauseum, we have to make sure that that is very clear, that that was the intention.
Right, and in section 7, it identifies the
Yes.
projects and it says
It does.
no other purpose.
It does. I'm just a big overkill. Every time we get the chance to go say that only for the projects in section 7. Only that it's limited to that. There's 2 or 3 opportunities throughout there to just parenthetically make that reference, and I just think it's a good idea.
Thank you very much.
Because as I said before, to me, that's the only part of this whole project that the state, I think, would have been germane to the state.
Right,
Thank you very much.
okay.
Can I ask just a question, Bill?
Mr. Chairman.
So if you would insert that language in section 2, I'm just following what you're saying, is that was the action of the board.
Right. It is. I would just add something like after that $51 million, that says to be used for those items detailed in section 7. I mean, something,
Well,
That's specifically delineated in section 7.
Yeah, something like that.
Right, it's something to the effect, I understand, and would be in section 2, expressing $2018 to be used for the limited purposes of securing gross receipts, tax increment bonds, the proceeds of which will only be used for.
As delineated in section 7.
Right. And there'll be a couple of other opportunities where it's clear that that's what it is.
But again, I don't need to receive it, just following what you're suggesting. I think it would be appropriately inserted in some form or fashion after the $51 million references, so that it's specifically delineated in section 7.
Right, right, you're saying that in section 2?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
And I don't think that would materially alter
No.
the resolution anyway, just add some specifics.
I mean, it's okay the way it is. She specifies
I
in
get it.
section 7. This just fortifies it, that's all.
I'd be okay with that. So I think it makes sense. Okay, and on that thought, because I think McCormick makes a valid point, and I mean, these are, I'm reading it, and just so that I'm clear in my read of this, when we reference $2018, I'm anticipating that there will be current day dollars moving forward.
Well, and where it becomes significant is
$50
$250
million
million.
down the road. But I read it that way, and I'm hoping that that's how I read it. I don't think there's any ambiguity as far as I'm concerned, but if there's a way to clarify that, then I'm okay with it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, when we were discussing this, specifically asked the question if it was $2018. And I think that's because most of the application originally was in $2014. So when they amended the application, these numbers were $2018. But there was no discussion as to what sort of inflation factor or index.
Well, that'll be the actuals that take place over that period of time, I presume.
You're not reading this. You all saying move on? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dylan.
Go ahead.
Okay, section 3, you have the effective date of the dedication, which is January 1, 2019, and in connection with that, because the law requires notification to TRG within under 20 days of the dedication, we did send to TRD or actually Dominic sent a letter to TRD notifying them of the board's action and letting them know that the actual resolution would be forthcoming.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on.
In section 4, it's the waiver of the requirement for the 4 years for bonding. And we made that a specific because there were no other waivers associated with this particular application.
Section 5.
Section 5 provides that it's such time as $250 million expended in construction of the comprehensive medical facility. All state GRT increment generated within the district will revert to the state. And then after the comprehensive care facility has met the $250 million threshold, increment revenues generated from that date forward would be available for bonding.
Could you tell me, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Section 5 is on page 3006 midway.
Okay, but I don't see the reference to 250 million of 2018.
Right, and well, that's because the comprehensive, you see a reference in section 5 that says comprehensive medical care facility construction commencement date.
Right.
That term is defined in one of the whereases.
Okay.
And in that whereas, we talk about the $250 million. So I'm gonna go back. It's on page.
It's on page 2.
Page 2 of the document.
3002.
302. And it's actually the last resolution, then going into the third page where it says the State Board of Finance will deem construction of the first phase of comprehensive medical care facility to have commenced on the date that the district reports to the State Board of Finance that the health services provider has expended $250 million expressed in calendar 2018 dollars on comprehensive medical care facility property, which is defined in another whereas clause, at least 85% of which, that's the referring to the $250 million, must be expended on actual construction costs. And then that they would provide, the district would provide the report together with the documentation of those expenditures.
Member Cormack.
Is there any provision in terms of, will the documentation take place one time at the end of the period? Or will the information with regard to the construction of the healthcare facility, will we see progressive data on the actual construction cost as the project goes forward? Or is it a one-time provision? I mean, presumably it will take years to construct this. At the end of a period, will the district come back to the board and say, this is the number? Or will we see it as it progresses along?
Okay.
Member Urshel.
I think that's a great question, and the reason that I put that in there to begin with was because the report that was presented to us was based on something that was similar to Russ Medical Center, which was, as I recall, about $350 million, $375 million project. That project was designed but built with the first 2 phases simultaneously. They were built within 2 years of each other, 2.5, 3 years at the most. So the facility that I have in mind is going to generate, quote unquote, the jobs that were represented that makes this whole TID thing work, to me, is, and what I meant by 85% being spent on the facility means we're serious about building a $375 million project, and we are going to start construction. It's going to be built in 2 years, and when we get to 85%, or when we get to $250 million, then we're eligible to start getting reimbursed. I mean, that's the thought. What I did not want is for 4 years from now, if somebody spent $2 million on studies and engineering and architecture and put that aside and save your receipt. And then 4 years from that, get another one and save $2 more million. Then build a $75 million facility and it's a urgent care center. And then 5 years from then, add the annex to the urgent care center and blah, blah, blah. And pretty soon you've spent $250 million on something that was worth $100 million and didn't anywhere near represent the number of jobs that we're talking about in the Russ Medical Center. Otherwise I don't care. It's just that here the representation was there will be a facility that's gonna get built and all of this stuff is gonna happen. That's what I went by. So I think we need to be careful in crafting that definition to say that it's meant to be a complete system, okay, one complete system that is built within a reasonable time, 4 years, and that those dollars are indexed in some way that we define now. And we might get the help of our economists or someone to help us. I'm thinking CPI, something that we specify is going to be indexed using this index. So that anybody, if you were doing, 10 people were doing the calculation, to be fair to the developer and be fair to the state, everybody is agreed that that's the index we're gonna use that is the most fair in the construction industry, that says this 250 million equals 313.7 million, and that's very predictable. As opposed to somebody picking their own indexing system and everybody arguing about that, and the developer, I'm thinking, not getting reimbursed because people come up with, a trick or whatever. So we ought to define, I'm worried about it from both sides. We ought to say, in my opinion, that is meant to be a comprehensive facility and comprehensively built.
Well, to that point, if I may, if you look at the second whereas on the first page,
Right?
it defines what the comprehensive medical care facility means. And is anticipated to include a 900,000 square foot comprehensive medical campus, to be located on the medical campus site.
I guess I would just say that, we could work with them or whatever, but to say, to me, I think a facility that I have in mind would easily be built when they're getting ready to go to construction within 2 years. But to cut some slack, I think that 3 or 4 years is reasonable. What I don't want to see is 20 projects that are $100,000, $1 million each. Exactly. So I think we ought to that's a good definition. I think we ought to put a time limit on that. What we mean is that it's a comprehensive facility built as a unit or immediate sets of units that are within a 4 year period or something like that. And because what's being represented is that the enormity of the deal is what's gonna make all this go. I mean, that's what is being represented. And all I'm saying is, as I sit in this chair, if that's what you mean, then let's make sure that that's what we say.
Okay, well, if you're going to make changes to your vote,
No,
I'm gonna say if you're gonna make material changes to, the resolution, then that would have to wait until next month. Because what you have
I'm
is
fine
already-
with that. I don't think I'm making changes. I'm saying what I meant by when I said a $250 million expenditure. So I'm just wondering if a couple of modifiers that say that, that's what I meant. Now, if the board thinks that requires another vote or whatever, that's fine. I just hate to see nickel and dimes.
Okay, and I'm sorry.
And if Kimber actually would yield to questions, I'm just trying to follow.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna reference, I believe it's the second paragraph on page 1. And I just wanna make sure I'm following, because I think what you're saying is not a material change. I think it's just a clarification.
Right.
We wouldn't change the parameters of the resolution. And by the way, I do think it pretty much memorialized everything that we talked about all day long. So thank you for doing that, because I don't apply for that. So, member Schwartz? I'm sorry, yeah, that's okay. You referenced in your discussion a comprehensive facility, and I'm reading this, it says a medical campus site. Is that sufficient definition? And then it goes on to say, comma, and it's a continuum, so I'm thinking it's one of the same. The 200, the medical campus site, that's in parentheses. And then 2,000 square feet of medical office space. So that's part of what you're contemplating. I'm just trying to follow.
I am, but I think I would feel more comfortable if that were to go on to say, all built as one system within a 4-year period. Something like that.
For the construction period.
Yeah.
Now, I sort of follow you, but I think the 4-year might cross that line. I don't think we discussed the time frame last time.
Okay.
So that, I'm good with what you're suggesting, but I think if we insert a 4-year change, then that might kick us to the next meeting.
Right, and I can tell you that, the form that you have in front of you, in addition to all the other stuff that I described last week, Wednesday, I had with Donna and Clinton Nicely, had a telephone conference with Justin Horwitz where we, went over the terms that are included here. And, essentially, everyone, we all agree that as presented, this represents what you voted on on July 17th.
Sorry.
Conference. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I am, Justin Horowitz. Here, I just also to reiterate what Sally said, when we worked, cut the first draft, worked collaboratively, and I was impressed with her capture of the terms as reflecting the discussion at that meeting as I understood it, and was comfortable on behalf of my client with the presentation here of the resolution.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, shall we continue? Everybody okay here? All right.
Do you want me to go to the next section?
Yes.
Okay.
In the section that we're in.
We're at section 6 now,
Okay.
which is essentially sets the, again, references the $250 million, limit and the deadline for that, because we waived the 4-year period. We made that to run concurrently with the deadline for, actually, it's the deadline for the bonding. So, the, essentially sets the deadline for the $250 million expenditure, which is May 2037. So that they have to reach that $250 million by that date, or not, the dedication basically terminates. And there's also, what you need to understand, or what I think what's clear is that up until, so we have a dedication that now begins effective in January of 2019, and they'll have to start reporting any gross receipts tax that is generated in the district after that date. And that money will be then, based on the notification that we provided to TRD, will be deposited in in a special account, and then they disperse at TRD, they disperse that monthly. What the resolution requires, and it basically mirrors the transact, or the type of agreement that was reached with the city of Albuquerque, was that they would be returning that increment on a quarterly basis back to the state. And it goes back into the general fund until they reach that $250 million threshold.
So under the Albuquerque provision, there was, an ability to, I understood, to use administrative costs.
Right, no,
There's none of that in this? Okay.
no, because the use of the increment is only for bondholders.
Right.
And then in section 7, it was what the bond proceeds may be used for, which, are the interchange project. And that's fairly self-explanatory. In section 8, there was discussion about limiting the, carrying costs, so that, that's limited to 2.5%. Section 9 contemplates that the district notify the board of any amendments or changes to the plan, and that's pursuant also to the act. And then in section 10, you have a requirement that the developer apply for and obtain from some form of participation from Bernalillo County.
Can I ask you a question about that section 9?
Yes.
If, in the event that the plan changes, does the board have any options there to basically work the increment, or can the plan change in any way and we're stuck with this resolution?
Well, under the act, it says there are limitations on what the changes are in terms of that it can't change the benefits that were contemplated under the original plan. And so, and essentially this increment, and there's language that says it basically, in that same section, that this dedication was made on the basis of the plan that's presented today. And so, I would, if there were to be, notification that somehow that it changed significantly or materially, then, I would imagine that the board has the ability to.
So if, in other words, if the TID decided to put a strip club there of some sort, the board could basically go back and rebuild it.
I don't know if that's a very good example, because I don't think that the plan gets into that level of detail in terms of if there's commercial.
I'm being facetious.
I know you're being facetious,
But I'm saying that something extraordinary could happen.
Well, I think,
My recollection is that what they presented, and I was kind of surprised by it, but what they presented, and also what our own reviewers stipulated, was that it was specifically a medical facility, period. And what I recall them explaining was that if that gets changed, okay, or whatever, that it's not it's off the, it doesn't apply.
No, the plan is not limited to, the medical facility. Medical facility is one component of that whole TID plan. And this TID district is 336 districts. The medical campus site is 56 acres.
Right.
And so the medical facility is to be located on that, and that's just one component. But it also contemplates that there would be commercial, retail, and housing.
Yeah. So remember, and if I may, I think that, again, if we go back to that second paragraph on our electronic presentation 301, it talks about the various usage that are anticipated within the TID itself. And it does talk about, obviously, the hospital, or what we believe to be a hospital, and then the other retail space that includes 206 hotel rooms and 874 units of family housing. And then on the next page, it also talks about that in the second full paragraph in terms of what is anticipated within the actual healthcare facility in terms of its usage. So I think it is covered, but there is room for retail. I mean, I think clearly what was presented to us was that the entirety of the kit would contemplate other usage beyond just the hospital. There would be ancillary benefits such as, I'm sure if there's a hospital, there's going to be a McDonald's close by of some sort because they all have them. And most hospitals, although it hasn't happened at Rust yet, some kind of hospital facility, hotel facility for families to stay if other family members are in the hospital. It's all encompassing, so it's just not limited to that, but there is specific, and how I'm reading this, Sally, Mr. Chair, is that all these components have to be met in order for the kit to kick in.
And in fact, there was discussion about making sure land use provisions were made so that it did specify that some type of medical facility would be in place.
On the 51 acres that is specifically outlined in the resolution. At least that's what I'm reading.
I understand all that. What I don't understand is the city of Albuquerque put a trigger on it that said, when you invest $100 million in a medical facility, then our bonds are gonna kick in. And we, Annie, that said, we will set aside 51 million for the state's portion of that, and that when $250 million are as a trigger, regardless of McDonald's and everything else that's gonna go on, when $250 million on a medical facility, okay, and what they said, what I recalled is maybe Presbyterian, may not be Presbyterian, that's okay.
Right.
But it's, to us, the trigger is a medical facility.
Yes.
Regardless of all the
Yes.
other stuff that's going on.
Yes,
So our bonds are not gonna flow if there is no medical facility.
That's
If there's a different facility that gets put in there, I assumed, when I was voting on it, somebody would have to make a case, come and show us what's the jobs that come with that, what's, you know, because
yes,
we reviewed an application that said, here's what's gonna happen
Right.
with a medical facility.
Right.
And I specifically asked them as they were providing testimony, are you talking about a Russ Medical Center here? Is that what you're talking about? Yes. Okay, that was 375 million. So I said, you know, if that's what we're talking about, in order to guarantee the public that we're gonna use this money in a way that's responsible, we ought to be talking about something that's close to that. So I didn't make it 375, but 250 with a medical facility is the trigger.
yes, I'm sorry.
Yes or no? I mean,
Yes,
agree
that's
with that.
correct.
Yeah,
That's correct, and I'm sorry I misunderstood your question, so
Yeah.
let the discussion.
I mean,
That's
if
straight.
there is gonna be no medical facility,
Well,
I
there is
think,
no tip.
Right,
right, then that was John's question.
That's what I read this.
Well, so, yeah, so
well,
the
there,
medical facility is a necessity.
right,
Okay. I mean,
right.
let's move to, so we're at number 10, is that correct?
Yes. And 10 is getting, Bernalillo County to participate in the financing. And, it may be through, TID participation, or it may be through other, participation. And I'm gonna defer to Justin in terms of, because they have other programs currently in Bernalillo County, that they use for financing. And so that's why we chose not to do it limited to just, TID language, but also, some other form of participation based on those other programs that currently exist in Bernalillo County.
Major attraction.
Yes, so we're going
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, board members, we understand from Bernalillo County that in addition to their ability to participate directly in the tax increment district program, they've also recently adopted a GRIP ordinance, gross receipts tax increment program ordinance, which they're allowed to undertake as a home rule county. Essentially, it's a form of TID light. It allows them to dedicate increment by contract rather than through the participation in the TID itself. And for local reasons, there may be an interest there in participating and delivering dollars to that mechanism.
Right, but again, if the county and the district is, This falls in line with the $250 million that they have until May 1, 2037 to get the county to participate, and then if the county chooses not to participate by that date, then the board's dedication, again, will expire. So all of these, things have to sort of work together.
Okay.
And then section 11, reporting requirements, and section 12 is, once everything's paid for, dedication expires.
All right, let's go to the board. Any discussion on this? Anything else? Treasurer Reichenberg.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't go through this the first time, but I think that, now that I've got it now, something that our attorney has done has calculated all of this stuff that you all discussed and voted for. And lodging, a lot of hard work. This was a very impressive outcome, so thank you for providing that. And it lets us move forward with what we did. Which was many hours of conversation. Way back. Thank you for your efforts. And thank you as well for your participation. And also the Clinton back there who really worked hard at trying to put this together for us. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Treasurer.
I don't like it, but it's what the board.
Thank you, Treasurer Reichenberg. Anything else? Member Oregon.
On page. On page 9. I'm thinking that it may be referencing me rather than Jonathan.
Oh, right. And this is actually, it's
Am I moving to the next?
yeah, it's not,
I wanted to make sure, okay.
hopefully it'll be
Gotcha.
correct, it will correct, it should be correct in the minutes. This was just a transcript in order to facilitate the
Just,
drafting.
just making sure.
It's not an official document.
You know, I'm better with John. They can't blame me. But
I know John Oregon and you're no John Oregon.
I just like, can you direct me to where the requirement for bonding that needs to be approved by the legislature is in the resolution?
It's not in the resolution per se. I mean, the fact is that under the TID Act, the TID Act requires bonding. Requires bonding and legislative approval. So, I mean, I can add that, but I don't think it makes any difference because the requirement for the legislative approval is in the act.
Well, there were discussions prior to this that indicated that it could be basically a cash transaction.
It's not, well,
Well, all I'm saying is that it seems to me that if all you're doing is reinforcing which is already in statute, I don't think it hurts to include it in the resolution.
okay, so under section 2 of the, which is on, again, on page, which is 2005. 2006. Where it says, pursuant to the act and the rules of the State Board of Finance hereby dedicates to the district 65% of the state gross receipts tax, 51 million, et cetera, to be used for the limited purpose of securing gross receipts tax increment bonds to be issued by the district and for no other purpose in compliance with 515F and the tax increment plan. And under, I mean, I could add one additional, statutory provision, which is that, I think it's 21.
I would appreciate if that was
Which
included.
is 2021 is the vetting for the legislative approval. You know,
Sure, the language that,
right, so if, in section 2, we're at the last, sentence, for no other purpose in compliance with NMSA 515-15F, which is the State Board of Finance, approval, and then add, comma, NMSA 515-21, which is the legislative approval, provision, and the tax increment development plan.
I think that's fine.
Thank you.
Member Archuleta.
I think that we need to add a whereas, and then check to see that it would be agreeable. I would think so. But where you put in all these whereases and you refer to $2014, $2018, et cetera, I think there needs to be a standalone whereas that says that whereas it is understood that the CPI, Consumer Price Index, will be used as an index to index all 2014, 2018, or any future dollars as the data and as the basis. And I think, that is probably a CPI is the closest to the construction. We use it in our firm for everything that we do in infrastructure in the state of New Mexico. People use the CPI. But I think it would be good you're referring to, well, it's $2014, it's $2018, without saying to somebody, we're gonna use an index. That doesn't make sense. See what I mean?
That's right, no, like, adding that beside it, does that?
No.
I'm gonna,
Yeah, just add a comment. I've seen in earlier board resolutions where there's a reference to, I think, something called the ENR Construction Index. And I don't know which one's more appropriate, but I think I've seen that used typically in district projects.
You could discuss it and just come up with an index as to what's most appropriate. And then if you'd like to, whatever's proposed, I'll help you review it, from our standpoint, or you can get technical staff here to do it.
Everybody's work though. Either those two indexes.
Yeah, they're just indices, and so if you wanted to compare 2014 to 2018 or whatever you
What
want.
was the index that Justin was?
Engineering news record.
Gotcha.
It's just the engineering news record, ENR. So it's similar to CPI. It might be more, CPI takes other businesses into account.
But this is more industry.
ENR is
Specific.
probably more construction. I mean, it could be. But if I was serving the state, if I was working for the state, what I would do is look at those indices and make sure that I agree with them, that they're, that it's, I would probably look at them and see, and they could do it, and make a recommendation to you as to whether they prefer the ENR or the CPI as to what has tracked best with construction's cost. Just to be fair, it's fair to both sides. It's not a gotcha on anybody's side. It's just what you don't want is them, 20 years from now to be held up by saying, or 10 years from now, or whatever, being held up by saying, getting an argument as to what it was. So it's just figured out.
So procedurally, can I ask the chair to make a ruling that, maybe a two-pronged ruling from the chair? A, that I believe clear intent of the board for the event in July was that we would be using current day dollars, so that 2037 would not be $250 million. It would be $2037,
Right.
whatever that would be. That was, again, the chair ruled that was the intent of the board, and I think it's important that we do this. A, and B, that by adding a second preamble paragraph, you reference the whereas paragraph, or preamble, to include language that would index specifically, would not go beyond the scope of what today's notice was, but we're not materially changing or amending. I think we're clarifying. So the chair would rule on that.
Yeah, and the reason that that's needed, if I could, Mr. Chairman, the reason that that's needed is not just on the $250 million, which could at that time be $350 million, but on their $51 million, which would be $75 million or $80 million for that. So it's in both parties' interest to define it.
But if it's like share a rule or something.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, so in the past, it's been, our practice to use the US CPI index. We've had a couple of years that they were issuing bonds, like a second and third issuance, and we were trying to figure out what amount was left of what capacity they had. And so it has been a practice to figure out the capacity using the US CPI index with prior tips.
And again, I don't have any quotes with either index, I'm not familiar with what the trustee alluded to, and I know you are. But I just want to make sure that the chair makes the appropriate ruling, so that if we add an additional paragraph that's within confines of legal notice and germane to.
I think it just clarifies what it means.
And I
2018 dollars.
Make
CPI is more commonly used. ENR is, they may not exist in 10 years, I don't know. It's a publication.
I know
CPI is known to everybody, and it takes into consideration.
The other thing is, you may apply, I think you go to CPI, because clearly for the 51 million, that's not medical restructuring, right? That's a different deal. So I think it's more universal.
I'm okay with that.
Right, thank you very much. So you want to ruling from the chair. Why can you, or the likely be with the ruling based on the discussion we've had here? Can you formulate what you need to have?
I think based on the discussions that were held in the July meeting, that, the intent was clear, that it was a $2018, and that, you know, that would carry, and that's how that would be calculated going forward. And so I don't have an issue now with, just having a conversation with Mr. Horowitz and, agreeing on language that would include, and what I'm understanding, the CPI index is the more universal, of the indices used, and one that, I mean, I'm familiar with it just based on all of the other types of transactions, the leases, the rent escalators, et cetera, that the board uses. Generally, we use the CPI index.
Why is there, I just want to make sure the chair says that it's germane and it's not beyond the scope of the notice, that's all.
Yeah.
Just to make sure it's not an issue. And I think that's what Sally just said.
Right.
So, in my own words, without my lips moving. I agree.
And I'm assuming there's no challenges. I'm assuming that the board is adopting the ruling of the chair.
Yes. The index, or because you're referring to relative points in time and the value of something, it's inferred.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Thank you all very much. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so we've got one, let's talk about that. One of the piece, the letter.
Mr. Chairman,
And
yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, on page 3027 is the letter that I received from Bernalillo County Manager Julie Morgan-Sbof, and she is discussing the county's current GRT increment allocations. As the letter states, the developer has not formally applied for an increment, so this letter is just an informational item that you're aware that the board has received.
So getting back to.
let's go back to 23.
I'm going to move approval of the draft.
There's it's an information.
So that's how we're handling it? Okay,
Yes.
so I'm good with that. Do we have to take any action, Mr. Chairman, as it relates to the paragraph, to the preamble paragraph? I don't think so, but.
Again, this is. Right, everybody okay with that? All right, let's move to information item number 25. This is the distillation custodial bank fees.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the fees are consistent with the historical fees.
And informational item number 26.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, there were 11 joint powers agreements for the months of July and August, and they are listed on page 3030 and 3031.
Well, thank you to staff for your hard work. We appreciate it. The board members, thank you for good discussions this morning. And thank you to staff, and Sally, thank you very much for your work. We appreciate it. Thank you.
So. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah, yes, I saw that, I corrected. I corrected.